Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the soft amber glow of an Egyptian dawn, when the air is still cool enough that your skin prickles before the sun climbs too high. You're here, standing along the edge of the Nile, where reeds whisper and boats rock gently, as if the river is already awake before the people. The sand beneath your feet feels cool now, but you know in a few hours it'll be the world's largest frying pan. Honestly, you probably wouldn't survive here without either a local's instincts or, let's be real, an industrial-strength sunscreen that hasn't been invented yet. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you watching from tonight? And what time is it where you are? Drop that in the comments so I can imagine who's lying there with headphones in, maybe wrapped in a blanket, maybe not. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first breath you take is a mixture of water dampness and the faint, earthy smell of silt that drifts on the morning breeze. The Nile has carried that same perfume for millennia, and right now it's almost like the river itself is whispering a morning greeting. You hear roosters, not the kind from your suburban neighbor's ill-advised chicken coop, but sharp, echoing calls bouncing off mud brick walls. They're the natural alarm clocks of an ancient village. Some dogs bark half-heartedly, already knowing today will be long and hot, and you can almost sense the village stirring even before you see the people. In one corner of the settlement, a woman carries a jar on her head, balancing it so gracefully that if you tried it, you'd probably snap your neck in 2 steps. She moves through the twilight blue haze, and you notice how her linen dress, stiffened with starch, makes her silhouette look crisp against the flickering hearths that are beginning to smoke. That smoke is thin, almost lazy, and yet it curls, upward like it has a purpose, carrying the scent of last night's embers reignited. There's a moment where the world feels hushed. You stand at the threshold of houses made from sun-baked mud brick, walls warm even in shadow, roofs flat and holding yesterday's heat like stubborn clay. The people inside are waking slowly, yawning, rubbing their eyes, and in your imagination you can almost hear someone muttering the ancient equivalent of, 5 more minutes please. Sleepiness is timeless after all. Now you notice the Nile again, this time alive with soft ripples as a fisherman pulls his reed boat closer to shore. He has the kind of wiry strength that comes not from lifting weights, but from a lifetime of pulling nets, and his bare feet are already damp from stepping into the shallows. He ties his boat lazily and looks toward the village, probably thinking about his share of breakfast. Bread and beer might not sound like a feast to you, but to him it's fuel, the same way you might reach for your morning coffee, or, if you're one of those people, a suspiciously large energy drink that turns your tongue neon blue. Somewhere nearby you hear the rhythmic thump of grain being pounded. It's almost like a drumbeat, echoing between the narrow passageways. Women squat beside grinding stones, moving the upper stone back and forth, turning barley and emmer wheat into coarse flour. The sound is steady, calming, like the world's oldest metronome keeping time with the sun. You feel the rough texture of grain dust floating in the air, catching in your throat, just enough to remind you that breakfast here isn't instant. It's carved out of effort, one grinding stroke at a time, and yet there's comfort in this routine. Everyone knows their part, and you notice how smoothly it all happens. It's almost theatrical. A boy runs past carrying kindling, his feet, there his laughter high-pitched and bright as he drops twigs beside the hearth. An older man yawns wide enough you could probably count his teeth, except, well, let's just say dentistry hasn't reached the standard you might prefer. His linen kilt is rumpled, his hair shaved close, and you can see he's already bracing himself for hours of work beneath a sun that's only now beginning to show its edge above the horizon. This horizon, by the way, isn't subtle. The light bursts suddenly, a hard gold line across the desert's edge. The reflection on the Nile dazzles like liquid bronze, and for a moment, the whole world looks staged, like a special effect, but one designed thousands of years before anyone invented cinema. The warmth spreads quickly, pushing away the night's coolness, and the birds, ibises, herons, sparrows, take to the sky in noisy squadrons. Their wings clap, their calls mingle, and the whole atmosphere feels like it's shaking itself awake. You stand still, watching, absorbing, and in this pause your mind drifts to history itself. You remember that one of the most well-known events along this river was the reign of Pharaoh Ramses II, who supposedly lived long enough to father over 100 children. Imagine waking up to breakfast in that household, dozens of little voices clamoring for bread, honey, and probably more attention than even a pharaoh could manage. Historians still debate whether that number is exaggerated, but if you've ever seen kids swarm at a school cafeteria, you can picture the chaos. Closer to the ordinary life around you, though, lies a quieter, lesser-known fact. Egyptians sometimes flavored their beer with dates. The sweetness gave it not just calories, but also a taste that made mornings a bit brighter. Think of it as their version of adding pumpkin spice to lattes. Seasonal, comforting, maybe a little unnecessary, but it made life taste good. The air now grows busier. You hear chatter as women call to each other from house to house, trading quick greetings. Their voices are sharp yet warm, rising above the grinding stones and the dog's occasional barks. You notice children rubbing their eyes, hair sticking out at odd angles, looking suspiciously like every child who has ever been told, "Wake up, it's time for school," even though their version of school involves reciting prayers or practicing letters on pottery shards. And then, a sudden laugh bursts from a man stretching his arms, the sound deep and hearty. It echoes into the morning like the punchline of a joke no one told you. You look at him, his back bent slightly from years of farm work, his face weathered, but glowing in the golden light, and you realize he's content. He's up before the fields demand him, before the oxen plod along furrows, before sweat clings like glue. For now there's peace, and the peace tastes faintly of smoke, grain, and the sweet stickiness of dates waiting in a basket. The river hums along, carrying its eternal current. And you imagine yourself drifting with it, slow, unhurried, almost hypnotic. Time here feels different, thicker, slower. You catch yourself breathing deeper, your chest expanding with the warm, heavy air. There's one more detail, faint but unforgettable. In the distance, temple bells ring softly, calling priests to their dawn rituals. The sound is high and clear, cutting through the village noise, reminding everyone that while breakfast waits, the gods wait too. It's a balance between the divine and the ordinary, the sacred and the stomach. You linger a moment longer, feeling the world fully awake now. The sky is pale gold, the smell of fresh bread begins to rise, and your ears are full of voices, laughter, and the steady rhythm of a day beginning the way it always has. And slowly, you step toward the hearth, ready to see what comes next as the morning deepens. You step closer now, drawn as if by invisible threads to where the heart of the village beats. The hearth waits. Not just one hearth, but many. Small mud brick ovens clustered in courtyards, each with its own soft chorus of crackles, pops, and hisses. Together they form the hum you notice. Not a single note, but a whole harmony of domestic life. It's like a living soundtrack, somewhere between a gentle white noise machine and a barbecue pit that never takes a day off. The air here is thicker than it was by the river. Smoke curls up from the ovens, drifting through open doorways and settling like a gauzy veil over the scene. The smell clings to your clothes immediately, a mix of charred wood, damp earth, and the faint sweetness of baking dough. It isn't unpleasant. It's grounding, earthy, like the way the smell of toast can fill a modern kitchen and convince your stomach it's hungrier than it really is. You glance into one of the courtyards. A woman kneels beside her oven, hair dark and gleaming with oil, linen dress stiff from starch. She pats a round of dough with palms practiced from years of repetition. Slap, flatten, dust with flour. The motions are as fluid as a pianist's fingers skimming keys. You lean closer, and the heat radiating from the clay walls warms your cheeks. "Too hot already," she mutters under her breath. Then she half turns toward you, though of course she can't see you, and says to a younger girl beside her, "Bring more wood. No, the dry sticks. Not the green ones." The girl scurries, bare feet padding on the packed earth. She tosses in the twigs and sparks leap up. Tiny fireflies trapped in the hearth's throat. The crackle grows louder and the hum deepens, as if the oven itself is purring. You realize that what you're hearing, the ovens, the voices, the grinding stones nearby, feels almost orchestral. Every household adds an instrument. A cough, a laugh, a sneeze, the shuffle of sandals, the thud of firewood. If you closed your eyes, it would sound like the world's first ASMR soundscape channel. minus the whispered, "Hey guys," someone behind you clears his throat dramatically. It's an older man, shoulders rounded from years of hauling loads. He's carrying a basket of reeds and sets it down with a grunt. "Every day the same," he says to no one in particular, but his wife answers anyway. "Yes, and every day you eat the bread, so maybe thank the same for that," he chuckles, shaking his head, and you can't help smiling. It's a timeless exchange. You could hear the same banter in any household now, one partner complaining, the other pointing out the obvious. The light has shifted again. The sun is climbing, its rays bouncing off the Nile and spilling into the courtyards. The glow turns the smoke golden, makes the air shimmer almost holy. And you think about how fire has always been sacred, especially here. Egyptians worshipped gods linked to the sun and to hearth fire, and the daily act of baking bread had spiritual undertones. It wasn't just cooking. It was connection, survival, offering. That connection makes you think of one famous event, the building of the Great Pyramid at Giza. You've probably heard that thousands of laborers hauled stone, blocks to create one of the world's wonders. But what fueled them? Not feasts of roasted meat, as Hollywood likes to show, but humble loaves and jars of beer baked and brewed in hearths just like these. The hum of ovens stretched all the way to that monumental project, keeping the workforce alive one bite at a time. Without these morning sounds, those stones might never have moved. You lean against a low wall, feeling the warmth of clay seep into your skin. Nearby, another family tends their hearth. Their oven is slightly cracked, patched with fresh mud that still carries the scent of damp earth. A boy about 8 years old fans the fire with a palm leaf, huffing dramatically each time smoke swirls his way. "It's in my eyes!" he cries. His sister snorts. "Because you keep leaning into it." "Do not tell me what to do," he snaps back, though his watery eyes betray the defeat. It's the sibling rivalry soundtrack you recognize instantly. Ancient or modern, brothers and sisters will argue in any century. The smell shifts again, and you realize a new loaf has been slipped into the oven. At first it's faint, dough beginning to puff, moisture sizzling as it evaporates. Then it deepens into something warm and irresistible, the universal scent of bread baking. It's thick in your nose, heavy in your chest, enough to make your mouth water even though you're not truly here. You can't help but think, forget luxury perfumes. If someone bottled this smell, it would sell out instantly. But the bread isn't the only thing cooking. In a pot balanced near the embers, a woman stirs lentils. The steam rises fragrant with garlic and coriander, filling the space with a sharper note that cuts through the sweetness of smoke and grain. She hums softly as she stirs, a tune without words, carried along by the rhythm of the bubbling pot. That's the real hum of the hearth, the harmony between sound, smell, and human presence. You notice how hands here rarely stop moving. Someone kneads, someone fans, someone stirs, someone chops. Every motion flows into the next, a seamless choreography. And you realize this is breakfast not just as a meal but as a ritual, a daily rehearsal of survival. One man passes by carrying onions, their skins papery and their smell sharp. He pauses, glances at you, or at least in your direction, and mutters, "Always onions, always tears." Then he laughs at his own joke, and you find yourself chuckling too. Imagine complaining about onions for 3,000 years straight. It's basically the original office coffee complaint. Now, the heat intensifies. The sun has cleared the horizon, and the courtyards feel like ovens themselves. Sweat prickles along your temples, the smell of bread mingling with the salty tang of your own skin. You fan yourself, half expecting an ancient equivalent of a ceiling fan to appear. Instead, a girl waves a palm frond near her grandmother, who sighs in gratitude. "Better than nothing," the older woman says, which is exactly what you'd mutter in front of a broken air conditioner. As you stand there, your mind drifts again to history. Did you know Egyptians sometimes used molds to shape loaves into little animals or symbolic forms? It wasn't every day, more for special offerings, but the idea that bread could be sculpted into a hippopotamus or a fish is oddly delightful. Imagine serving toast shaped like a hippo to your guest today. It would be the ancient version of a novelty waffle iron. The heat, the smells, the constant chatter, it all creates a trance-like rhythm. You breathe with it, settle into it. You hear the grinding still, steady and patient, underscoring everything like background percussion. And above it, the murmur of voices grows and falls. Some complain about the price of barley. Some laugh about a neighbor's lazy goat. Others whisper about temple rituals. Historians still debate how exactly these daily rhythms influenced larger social structures. But what you feel standing here is undeniable. The hearth is the anchor. Without it, no work begins, no prayers are offered, no lives are sustained. You watch one last loaf slide into the oven, its pale surface dusted with flour that clings to the baker's hands. She brushes her palms together, white powder puffing into the air, and sighs in satisfaction. Around you, others do the same, checking, stirring, laughing, swatting at smoke. And in this hum you realize lies the pulse of a civilization. The bread will soon be ready, and the grinding will never stop. And as you lean deeper into the glow of this courtyard, the scent of the first loaf pulls you toward what comes next. You move closer now, drawn by that low, steady rasp you first heard from the hearth's edge. It isn't fire this time or voices. It's stone against stone, a rhythm so constant it seems older than memory itself. The grinding is everywhere. It rises above the chatter, slips beneath the crackle of firewood, and weaves through the courtyard air like the hum of cicadas on a summer night. You feel it more than hear it, like a pulse, like someone rubbing sandpaper in your ear, but in the most oddly comforting way possible. The women crouch low on their haunches, backs bent, arms braced. Before them lie two slabs of sandstone, one flat and heavy, the other smaller, shaped to fit between their palms. Grain, barley mostly, sometimes emmer wheat, spills in little piles across the stone's surface. The top stone presses down, dragging forward and back until the grains surrender their hardness and turn to coarse flour. The sound is harsh at first, gritty like ice being crushed in a blender. But after a while it becomes background music. A child sits nearby, knees tucked under his chin, watching his mother's arms pump rhythmically. "Why so slow?" he asks, eyebrows furrowed. His mother doesn't pause. "Because the gods didn't give us fast stones." She smirks, then adds, "Do you want to try?" The boy hesitates, then shakes his head, muttering, "Too heavy." You almost laugh aloud. It's the ancient equivalent of being asked to carry in the groceries. Everyone wants the bread, no one wants the work. The smell here is different from the hearths. Instead of smoke, it's grain dust, dry, earthy, a little sharp in your nose. You breathe it in and it coats your throat, as if you've inhaled a spoonful of flour. Dust hangs in the shafts of sunlight slanting across the courtyard, tiny golden motes that sparkle like glitter, if glitter were invented 3,000 years earlier. Sweat beads along the women's temples, streaking lines through the flour smudges on their faces. One woman pauses to wipe her brow, leaving a pale streak across her skin. She chuckles and mutters something that sounds suspiciously like, "Always the dust, never the bread." Her friend beside her snorts, shaking her head. It's bread when it's done. Now push. You realize quickly, this is an endurance workout disguised as breakfast prep. Forget treadmills. Here you get toned arms by pulverizing barley every day before sunrise. Imagine an ancient Egyptian fitness influencer. "Hey guys, welcome back to my grind set," literally. The flour gathers slowly, scraped into bowls of woven reed. It isn't fine and white like you'd find in a supermarket aisle. It's coarse, speckled with bran and grit, so rough you suspect biting into it might polish your teeth or chip them. Historians still debate whether the Egyptians' famously worn teeth came more from age or from sand sneaking into their flour. But either way, chewing breakfast here was basically dental exfoliation. As you lean closer, you notice another detail, the stones themselves. Some are worn down, their surfaces hollowed into shallow troughs from years of use. They cradle the grains like little riverbeds, catching each kernel before it bursts into powder. Others are newer, edges sharp, surfaces flat and stubborn. The older stones almost seem gentler, whispering with every stroke, while the newer ones scrape loud and sharp like a violinist still learning their scales. A grandmother nearby hums as she works. Her song is low and wordless, just a vibration in her chest, but it keeps her rhythm steady. You lean in, almost lulled by it. She catches your eye, or rather, she lifts her face toward the courtyard as if sensing an audience, and mutters with a sly smile, "Grinding never ends. Even the pharaoh must eat." It's a casual truth but profound. You think of the reign of Hatshepsut, one of Egypt's most famous pharaohs, who expanded trade routes and filled temples with treasures from distant lands. Yet even she, draped in royal regalia, relied on women like this, bent over sandstone, turning barley into the flour that fed her court. Behind every royal banquet were backs sore from grinding and fingers dusted in flour. And then there are the lesser-known truths. Did you know the Egyptians sometimes mixed ground acacia pods or even desert grasses into their flour when supplies ran low? It wasn't ideal. Imagine chewing your morning toast and finding out it has the texture of hay, but it kept bellies full when harvests failed. That little fact hangs in your mind as you watch the steady grind. Not every day smelled this sweet. Some days it must have tasted like desperation. The courtyard fills with voices. One young woman, her sleeves rolled high, groans dramatically. "My arms are stone already." Her neighbor laughs. "Stone arms for stone bread." They both giggle, leaning against their grinding slabs for a moment before sighing and pushing on. There's the kind of humor that makes backbreaking work a little lighter. You hear it and think, yep, humans have always used jokes to survive Mondays. The grinding rhythm sharpens again. Grr, scrape, grr, scrape. The sound merges with distant clatter, pots being shifted, chickens complaining loudly from a nearby coop, a donkey braying as if he too objects to the dust in the air. The donkey's cry makes a child squeal with laughter, pointing and shouting, "He wants bread too." The mother responds without looking up, "If he grinds, he can eat." The line is quick, practiced, and you imagine she said it 100 times. It lands like a punchline, even if it was never meant to be. The sun rises higher and the light spills fully into the workspace. It catches the sweat on foreheads, turning it to little beads of fire. It glances off the dust motes, makes them glitter in the air. It strikes the sandstone, revealing flecks of mica that sparkle faintly with each stroke. Suddenly, the grind looks almost ceremonial, as if each push and pull is a prayer whispered into the earth. You lean closer, your hands itching to feel the stone. You press your palm lightly against one of the slabs, and the heat shocks you. It's warm already, sun-soaked, rough against your skin. You pull back quickly, brushing off the fine powder that clings to your fingers. You glance at a bowl of finished flour. It's not neat. It's lumpy, uneven, sprinkled with little shards of husk, but it's enough. Enough to become dough. Enough to feed a family, enough to keep life moving one day longer. That's all it ever had to be. A young man passes through carrying a basket piled high with more grain. "You missed a spot," he teases, pointing to a few stubborn kernels still rolling free on the slab. The woman grinding doesn't even look up. "Then grind it yourself." "Ah, but my hands are for fishing," he protests, wiggling his fingers dramatically. She snorts. Fish won't fill the oven. The banter ripples outward, drawing laughter from others in the courtyard. You smile, realizing you're watching the same dynamic you'd see today when someone tries to skip out on chores. The excuse might change. "Sorry, I've got a Zoom call." But the eye roll it earns is eternal. The air is heavier now, grain dust thick in your nose, sunlight pressing hot on your shoulders. Yet the rhythm doesn't falter. Grind, scrape, shift, breathe. It's hypnotic, almost meditative. You could fall asleep to it, if not for the occasional cough when someone inhales too much flour. Your mind wanders again to history. You recall Akhenaten, the pharaoh who tried to revolutionize Egyptian religion by focusing worship on one sun god. A bold experiment, a dramatic upheaval in culture and art. And yet, you can imagine that even during his radical reign, women still crouched over grinding stones, sweating and coughing, dust rising in the morning air. The world above may shift, but the grind never stops. The courtyards echo with these timeless motions until the bowls of flour are full. Hands brush flour from arms, children sneeze clouds of dust, and women stretch their backs with groans that sound far too familiar. And as the last of the morning grain is pulverized into the powder of survival, you realize the rhythm is about to change once again. Bread waits to be shaped, patted flat, and slipped into fire. The courtyard seems to pulse with a deeper rhythm now, shifting from the grind of stones to the shaping of something almost holy. You feel it in the air, the anticipation of bread, still invisible but already filling the space with promise. The flour, rough and uneven, is scooped into bowls with hands dusted white, palms cracked from years of work. There's no precision here, no neat measurements with polished cups or digital scales, just instinct, learned across generations. A handful for this, a splash for that, and the dough begins to breathe. You crouch near one of the women as she kneads. Her hands fold, push and stretch the mass of flour and water until it glistens faintly in the light. The dough sticks, then peels back with each push. You catch the sound, a soft slap against the wooden board, soothing in its repetition. The air thickens with the smell of damp grain waking up. And though you know it's just flour and water, there's something magical about this moment. The way it changes texture, the way it feels alive. A girl leans over the board and giggles. "Grandmother, why does it look like it's breathing?" she asks. The older woman doesn't stop kneading, "Because it wants to live," she replies, matter of fact, as if bread itself had a secret soul. You almost laugh, but then you think about it. The bread does kind of puff, sigh, and rise like a chest inhaling. For something that will soon be eaten, it puts up a very convincing performance. The ovens are already glowing. Mud brick domes, squat and rounded, sit like slumbering giants along the courtyard wall. Their bellies radiate heat, an invisible shimmer that ripples the air. You step closer and immediately retreat, your skin prickling like you've opened an oven door too quickly back home. One of the men tending the fire grins at your flinch. "Too hot for you?" he teases. "Yeah," you mutter under your breath. "Just a little bit." The smell of wood smoke curls upward, carrying the scent of yesterday's ash mixed with today's flames. It's stronger than any perfume counter at the mall, though admittedly less glamorous. You notice how the bakers use long wooden paddles to slide dough discs onto the hot clay walls inside the oven. The hiss is immediate, like rain on hot stone, followed by the swelling scent of fresh bread. Your stomach growls, loudly enough that a boy nearby raises his eyebrows at you. "Hungry, stranger?" he asks. "Always," you answer. It's true. The bread here is not your soft, fluffy bakery loaf. It's round, flat, often baked in molds that leave ridges along the sides. The crust is rough, spotted with scorch marks, and the inside dense, packed with grain that hasn't been sifted of its tiny shards of stone. You imagine biting into one and feel your teeth ache in sympathy. Dental care in ancient Egypt. Let's just say you wouldn't survive here. Still, the smell makes you forgive all that. Each loaf comes out steaming, placed on reed mats to cool. A child snatches one too soon and yelps, dropping it with a hiss, and the laughter that follows feels timeless. You can almost hear the echo of your own childhood, sneaking cookies straight off a tray while someone scolded, "It's too hot." History repeats, only the treat changes. Historians still debate whether bread in Egypt was more a daily comfort or a survival ration, but in truth it was both. Even in times of glory, like during the reign of Hatshepsut, when trade brought exotic goods from Punt, bread remained the anchor of life. Luxuries came and went. The loaf stayed, and here's the unusual part. Some of these loaves weren't even meant to be eaten by the living. Archaeologists have found bread offerings sealed inside tombs, perfectly preserved, hard as stone but still recognizable after thousands of years. Imagine being buried with your favorite snack, only to have it last longer than most empires. It's like packing a Twinkie for the afterlife, except without the plastic wrapper. The women talk as they work, voices rising and falling in a cadence that matches the kneading. "Did you hear," one says, "that the neighbor's oven collapsed last week?" Another chuckles. Collapsed? Or did their son sit on it again? Laughter ripples and you catch the sound like sunlight glittering across water. The rhythm of this space is hypnotic. Dough slaps, fire crackles, children giggle. Bread hisses in the oven. It's a symphony of necessity, one that requires no conductor, because it has been rehearsed for centuries. You lose track of time, lulled by the sameness, the inevitability. You blink and suddenly loaves are stacked high in baskets. Reed lids ready to carry them off toward breakfast tables, temple altars, or even palace kitchens if the tax collector decides today is collection day. You overhear a young man, sweeping flour dust from the ground, mutter something about Ramses III. He grins as he says it, though there's a sharpness in his voice. The pharaoh can fight the sea peoples all he wants, but if he doesn't send more grain, even his soldiers will be chewing on reeds. He smirks at his own boldness, then quickly lowers his head when his father gives him a look that clearly says, "Not in public." You file away the thought because, yes, Ramses III did fight the sea peoples, and yes, bread was always tied to politics. The baskets of bread smell rich, heady, comforting. You find yourself imagining where each one will go. Some will be carried to fields where men bend in the sun. Others will travel upriver on boats, destined for temples where priests will break them in offering. And some will stay here, tucked into homes, torn apart by families who don't need anything fancy. Just bread and maybe a little beer to wash it down. The thought is both humbling and grounding, how something so plain could be the thread stitching an entire civilization together. A boy sidles up beside you, holding out a small loaf, its crust still warm. "For you," he says shyly. You take it, the heat pressing into your palm, and smile. "Thank you." He grins, then runs off, probably to snatch another for himself. You lift the bread, break it open, and feel the steam rise against your face. The inside is dense, chewy, flecked with bits of brown. You take a cautious bite, wincing as a gritty crunch slides across your teeth. Okay, so maybe it doubles as sandpaper. Still, the taste is hearty, earthy, undeniably satisfying. It fills your mouth, then your chest, as though the bread itself insists on grounding you to this moment, this place. The courtyard grows quieter as the bread-making slows. The last loaves are pulled, the fire's banked. Women dust their hands and wipe sweat from their brows. Children dart off with baskets, and men shoulder loads for delivery. You watch as the space empties, leaving behind only the lingering scent of smoke and wheat. The silence feels heavy but not empty. It's a pause before the next rhythm begins, and you know where it's heading. Toward the cool jars waiting in shadowed corners, where the yeast and sweetness of brewing beer beckon as the next act of the morning's survival. The courtyard's fires fade behind you, leaving only a ghost of smoke on your clothes and a faint grit of flour along your palms. You step into a quieter corner of the village, where shadows stretch long over rows of squat jars, lined neatly like soldiers waiting for orders. Each jar is capped with mud or woven reeds, their rims streaked white, as though they've been sweating out secrets in the morning sun. The air here shifts, less ash and heat, more a tang of sour milk mingled with the earthy coolness of clay. It clings to your nose, sharp yet strangely comforting, like walking past the dairy aisle of a supermarket that hasn't quite nailed its refrigeration system. You crouch near one of the jars and hear it before you smell it, the faint bubble and hiss, the living murmur of fermenting liquid. It's not dramatic, not like bread slapping wood or fire snapping branches, but it hums with its own authority, a soft whisper of life continuing in darkness. Someone removes a lid and the aroma rises, thick, tart with a sweetness hiding underneath. You wrinkle your nose. It's not exactly yogurt, not quite beer. So it's both and neither, like the awkward cousin at a family reunion, who insists they belong at both the kids' table and the grown-ups. A woman dips a ladle in and pours some into a small bowl. The liquid is cloudy, pale, streaked with foam. She offers it to you. "Drink," she says simply. You hesitate. "Is it safe?" She chuckles, amused at your hesitation. "Safer than the river." You take a cautious sip. The taste strikes sharp at first, sour, almost vinegary, then mellows into a creamy smoothness that coats your tongue. It's unexpected, like biting into what you thought was a cookie and realizing it's actually a scone, but not bad. It fills you quickly, heavier than you expect. A reminder that in a world without lattes and protein shakes, this is both breakfast and survival strategy. Nearby, children gather around another jar, arguing over who gets the first sip. "It's my turn," one insists, tugging at the ladle. "No, yesterday was yours." The other counters. Their mother intervenes, sighing. "If you fight, you'll get none." Instantly, the quarrel dies down. Proof that some parenting strategies haven't changed in thousands of years. The scene feels homely, but its roots dig deep into history. You remember that milk, particularly from cows, goats, and sheep, was not just food but a sacred symbol in Egypt. Hathor, the goddess often shown as a cow, embodied motherhood and nourishment. Milk wasn't only for the table. It poured into rituals, an offering to gods and the dead. Even Cleopatra, centuries later, would supposedly bathe in milk for beauty. You can't help but imagine how many jars it would take to fill a royal tub and decide it's probably more than the village could spare in a year. But not all milk is destined for drinking straight from the jar. You watch as one man carefully pours it into a wide basin, then sprinkles herbs and salt, stirring with deliberate rhythm. The mixture thickens, curdles slightly, turning into a soft mass. He tips it onto a cloth and ties it, letting the liquid drain away. Primitive cheese is born right before your eyes. Simple, unaged, crumbly, but undeniably cheese. You grin at the thought. The world's first charcuterie board must have looked a lot more like survival than Instagram. You lean closer to the cloth bundle and catch the scent. Tangy, fresh with an undercurrent of grass and sweat. Not quite cheddar, not quite feta, something more elemental. A young boy wrinkles his nose. "It smells like the goats," he complains. His sister shoots back, "I smell like the goats." The laughter that follows is quick, bubbling, easy. Historians still debate just how widespread dairy was in Egyptian diets, especially since lactose tolerance wasn't exactly universal. Some argue that fermented milk and cheese were the safer bets, while fresh milk may have been reserved for children or the wealthy. You sip again from your bowl and think, if this is the safer bet, the raw version might really have been a dare. The jars themselves carry stories. Some are sealed for travel, destined to be loaded onto boats heading upriver with goods for temple offerings. Others stay here, traded between neighbors or measured out as part of workers' rations. During the building of the pyramids at Giza, for instance, laborers were fed not only bread and beer but also dairy, though whether that meant actual cheese or a version of this sour, drinkable yogurt is unclear. Still, you picture thousands of men hauling stones under the sun, sustained by gulps of tangy milk from jars like these. It's not quite the protein shake of champions, but it did the job. You brush your hand over one of the clay jars. The surface is rough, cool despite the rising sun, streaked with drips that have hardened into pale lines. It feels alive somehow, as if the vessel itself remembers every batch that's passed through it. A woman sees you touch it and says softly, "These jars have been with my family longer than I have." You nod, realizing that the container is as important as what it holds. Continuity shaped in clay, the human need to preserve, to carry nourishment forward. The courtyard fills with subtle sounds, the splash of ladles, the scrape of cloth wringing curds, the hum of flies hovering hopefully but always brushed away. Dogs linger at the edges, tails wagging, eyes bright, waiting for a spill. A child absent-mindedly tips a few drops onto the ground, and the dogs leap as though manna has fallen from heaven. Their delighted yelps echo against the mud brick walls, punctuating the morning. And you, sitting here with a clay bowl in hand, milk tart on your tongue, find yourself oddly soothed. The sun climbs higher, but the coolness of the jars creates a pocket of relief, as though time itself slows to let you breathe. There is no rush in this corner of the world, only patience, milk waiting to thicken, jars waiting to be emptied, life waiting to carry on. Your gaze lingers on one jar, sealed tighter than the rest, its lid pressed with a faint imprint of reeds. You wonder what it hides. More milk, or perhaps something precious, set aside for ritual. In ancient burials, jars of milk were often placed alongside bread and beer, meant to nourish the dead in their long journey. You shiver slightly at the thought. What would it be like to drink from a jar meant not for you but for eternity? The laughter of children pulls you back, grounding you. Their voices rise over the low murmur of the adults, and once again you're reminded that even in the simplest acts, drinking from a jar, sharing a bowl, there's continuity. The same sounds, the same gestures ripple across centuries. You glance at the pale liquid in your bowl and realize you're not just tasting milk. You're tasting survival, memory, even ritual. And just as the jars give up their milk, you sense that the morning itself is ready to give way to its next act. Beyond this shaded corner, in another part of the courtyard, jars of a darker brew are already beginning to stir. A frothier, earthier hum that carries the promise of beer. The courtyard air is still carrying the tang of milk, but now a different sweetness drifts in, sticky and low, like the perfume of a market stall that has been awake longer than you. You step closer and the light is shifting, softer than the blunt blaze of noon, not yet sharp enough to sting. The clay jars you've left behind seem to retreat into shadow while ahead. Baskets overflow with fruits that look like little suns turned inward. Dates, figs, some split already, oozing syrup that clings to fingertips and refuses to let go. Like that one friend who still texts, "You up?" at 3 a.m. You hear a woman's laugh rise above the rustle of palm fronds. She is seated cross-legged, slicing figs with a chipped bronze blade, her motions quick but unhurried. A child beside her sneaks one into his mouth, cheeks ballooning with the sticky pulp. "Slow down or you'll choke," she warns. He mumbles something inaudible, probably worth it. You smile because honestly same. The air hums with the buzz of flies, drawn to sugar like teenagers to Wi-Fi. You wave your hand, but the flies simply return, stubborn as spam emails. The baskets of dates glow amber in the dawn light, and when you touch one, the skin feels wrinkled yet soft, warm from yesterday's heat. You bite into it, thick, chewy, almost meaty. Sweetness floods your mouth, intense enough to drown thought. It's not polite to moan over fruit, but it happens. The figs are different. Cool against your tongue, they crunch with tiny seeds that scatter like hidden sparks. One bursts unexpectedly, and the juice slides down your wrist. A boy notices, grins, and offers you a reed mat to wipe your hand. You shake your head. It's fine, you say. He tilts his head. The ants will think it's theirs. He isn't wrong. You sit on a low stone wall watching how families share this fruit. No plates, no formality. Just hands moving from basket to mouth, chatter weaving through the sweetness. Someone tells a joke about a donkey stealing figs, and the laughter ripples easily. A man shakes his head and says, "Better the donkey than my brother." His brother snorts, tossing a date pit that misses his ear by inches. This is breakfast as entertainment, part nourishment, part improv comedy. The heat is rising, but slowly, like someone turning up the volume without you noticing. You hear the Nile not far away, a muted slosh against mudbanks, while palm trees throw their long slanted shadows, like sundials no one really checks. The fruit keeps arriving. Bundles of dried dates tied with fiber, figs pressed into cakes, and even a jar of honey so thick it moves slower than government paperwork. A woman leans toward you. "Eat," she insists, pressing another fig into your hand. "The gods bless those who do not waste." You obey. She smiles, satisfied. The sticky juice glues your teeth together, and for a moment you wonder if dentists in ancient Egypt were considered heroes. Spoiler, they were. As you chew, someone mentions harvests and the conversation tilts. Dates and figs are more than snacks. They're calendar markers. You hear an old man explain how pharaohs measured abundance in baskets of fruit offered at temples, alongside bread and beer. And without dates, he says, the Nile is only water. You nod, half understanding, half lost in the sugar fog. A younger man adds, "Do you know Cleopatra used figs to hide her death?" Everyone goes quiet for a heartbeat. Of course, you remember the story. The queen who smuggled an asp inside a basket of figs, letting its bite carry her beyond Roman chains. The group murmurs. "Historians still debate if it was true," someone mutters. The silence breaks with a shrug. Still a good story. Then another unusual tidbit. A girl points out that figs aren't just food, but also medicine, used to ease stomach troubles and even clean teeth when chewed with natron. You picture a child pretending fig seeds are toothpaste bubbles, and it nearly makes you laugh. The sun climbs higher, painting everything with a golden wash. Sweat beads on brows, fruit glistens, and even the flies seem sluggish. A boy drops a fig, and instantly, 3 chickens dash in like gladiators. The children cheer as if they're watching an arena battle. "Place your bets," one whispers dramatically, and for a second you could be at a very feathery Vegas. The rhythm of this breakfast feels timeless, unhurried. Figs squish, dates snap, laughter bursts and fades. Your hands are sticky, your lips glossy with sugar, your stomach humming with energy. The fruit is not just food. It is glue holding this cluster of lives together in dawn's fragile hour. You lean back, feeling the warmth seep into your bones, and notice someone already stirring a pot nearby. Something thicker, darker, and foaming just a little. Because after figs and dates, the morning isn't done yet. Beer is waiting. The sweetness of figs lingers on your tongue, but already a deeper smell creeps in. Something darker, earthier, with a tang sharp enough to wake even the sleepiest farmer. You turn toward the clay pot that has been bubbling at the edge of the courtyard. Its froth catching the sun in little flashes, like a cauldron that forgot to be scary. The air is thick with malted grain, damp and yeasty, carrying that same cozy funk you catch when you walk past a brewery today and wonder if someone left their bread dough in the rain. A man stirs the liquid with a stick, longer than your arm. He lifts it and the foam drips back in slow ropes, glistening gold brown. "Not ready," he mutters, then glances at you. "You want to smell?" He offers the stick under your nose. The aroma is sour-sweet, like bread and vinegar having an argument. You nod politely. "It's interesting," you say. He smirks. "Better than dying of thirst, eh?" Hard to argue with that sales pitch. Nearby jars of honey catch the dawn light. Their clay lids are sealed with mud. But a boy has pried one open, dipping his finger until it glistens like amber glass. He licks it clean, eyes fluttering in bliss. His sister swats him with a palm reed. "That's for the beer." He shrugs, sticky grin wide. Honey is rare enough to be a treat, but here it's being poured into the pot, mingling with barley mash, transforming bitter into sweet. Watching the golden thread swirl into brown foam feels hypnotic, like the world's first latte art. The heat builds as the pot simmers, and sweat beads on your neck. A fly lands on the rim, drunk on the fumes, staggering before falling in. The brewer flicks it away. "Free sacrifice," he jokes. Everyone laughs. You're reminded of craft beer names today. Half of them sound like inside jokes, too. Around you, workers gather, cups in hand. Not glass, not even clay, just scooped-out gourds, polished smooth. One man dips his gourd, lifts it to his lips, and gulps. The foam coats his beard, and he wipes it with the back of his hand. "Huh?" he sighs, exaggerated like a soda commercial. You can't help chuckling. A woman hands you a gourd. The liquid inside is cloudy, warm, thicker than anything you'd call beer in a bar today. You take a cautious sip. Sour, grainy, a little sharp at the back of your throat, but oddly refreshing. "Well?" she asks. You grin. "Better than goat milk," she bursts out laughing. "You'll live." The chatter turns lively. Someone recounts how workers who built the Great Pyramid were paid partly in beer. Thousands of liters a day flowing into dusty throats as payment and fuel. "Without beer," an old man says, "those stones would still be sitting by the river. You white, imagine pharaohs raising monuments with a workforce fueled by liquid breakfast. History's strangest energy drink sponsorship." Then another voice joins. "Did you know honey was once placed in tombs sealed tight? And thousands of years later it was still good." He dips a reed into the jar and licks it dramatically. "Eternal food," children giggle. You can't decide if that's inspiring or terrifying. Immortality through stickiness. The conversation shifts. "Historians still debate," says a thoughtful scribe nearby, "whether the honey added to beer was meant for flavor, preservation, or just to impress the gods." His voice trails like the foam sliding back into the pot. No one answers because really, why not all three? The courtyard grows louder, laughter fueled by rising buzz. Two men start mock arguing about whose village makes better beer. "Yours tastes like donkey sweat," one insists. The other grins. "Then why do you drink it all?" Their friends howl. A child pipes up, "The donkey drinks better than you." The group nearly collapses. You sip again. The warmth spreading through your chest, laughter slipping into your veins. The sun has climbed higher, baking mud brick walls, but no one moves quickly. A breeze lifts the scent of barley, mingled with sweetness and smoke, wrapping you in something heavy yet comforting. You lean against the wall, cup cradled in both hands, feeling the grainy texture against your lips, the faint fizz brushing your tongue. One man sings, a low chant about Ra guiding the sun, his voice deep as a drum. Another claps along. Soon others hum, the rhythm simple but strong. Beer, it seems, loosens not just tongues but music. You close your eyes, hearing the harmony, imagining this same chant echoing through centuries, a soundtrack brewed from barley and honey. And just as you begin to sink fully into the haze, someone nudges you. "Careful," he says, nodding at your empty gourd. "Too much before work and you'll end up sleeping in the fields." He grins knowingly, and you realize moderation is timeless advice. The morning heat presses harder now, the air buzzing with both insects and chatter. Children chase each other between jars. Women scold half-heartedly. Men argue about Pharaoh's tax collectors. The foam bubbles, the honey glistens, and you feel caught in the swirl of it all, half sweet, half sour, wholly alive. As you finish your gourd, you notice the courtyard shifting. Some rise to gather tools, others drift toward the river. The rhythm is changing again, tilting toward labor. But before work begins, one more ritual waits, something brewed even stronger, held in jars sealed tighter, meant not for daily thirst, but for something heavier, sharper and more dangerous, because after honey and beer, there is always wine. You step out from the courtyard, still buzzing with barley froth and honey, and the light outside strikes sharper now, the sun high enough to flatten shadows against the earth. The air feels drier, heavier, and the chatter of workers is shifting from laughter to a more focused rhythm, the language of labor about to begin. You follow them along a path beaten flat by countless bare feet, dust rising like powder around your ankles, a pair of oxen low in complaint as they are coaxed forward. Their harnesses creaking like old leather chairs in a boardroom no one wants to sit in. Ahead, a field stretches wide, stubbled with barley stalks cut days earlier. Golden shafts leaning in the breeze like stubborn hair that refuses to lie flat. A farmer crouches low, his tunic already damp with sweat, as he ties bundles into sheaves. His back glistens, each muscle moving under the sun like a machine. You feel the weight just watching him. Thinking, yes, this counts as CrossFit, minus the gym fee. Beside him, his wife kneels with a basket, scooping fallen grains, her hands moving fast enough to shame any modern vacuum cleaner. She looks up briefly and grins, wiping her forehead. Every seed counts, she says, half to you, half to the child next to her, who is distracted by a beetle shining green in the dust. The child giggles as the insect skitters, more interested in its tiny drama than in the weight of harvest. Someone nearby opens a sack, the smell of dried barley puffing into the air, dry and nutty, tinged with the faint sweetness of the Nile's soil. You hear the shuffle of feet, the dull thump of grain hitting wicker, the rhythm so steady it could almost be percussion. A young man looks at you and jokes, "You want to help?" "Payments in bread crusts," he smirks. You smile back, resisting the urge to remind him about your modern labor laws. The farmers pause for a drink. Not wine, not honeyed beer, but something simpler. A gourd of yesterday's brew, thin and sour but enough to quench. It's passed around, each sip small, careful. When it reaches you, you taste the faint fizz still lingering, the grain sharp at the edges of your tongue. It's not indulgence here, it's fuel as necessary as water, but safer than the Nile itself. As you stand there, a farmer begins to tell a story, half boast, half weary truth, of how fields like these once fed armies marching for Pharaoh. When Ramses rode north, he says, squinting into the sun, his soldiers carried bread and beer made from this same earth. He pounds his chest with a dusty fist, pride shining through the lines etched deep around his mouth. You realize he's speaking of the Battle of Kadesh, where thousands clashed and supplies meant survival. For him, history isn't carved on temple walls. It's sweating right here in the fields, tied in sheaves at his feet. A woman interrupts with a laugh, yes, and the soldiers still complained. She mimics a whiny voice. Too sour, too stale. Everyone chuckles. The man throws a bit of chaff at her in mock protest. Their humor is dry but warm, like the fields themselves. The sun climbs higher. The air thickens until every breath tastes of dust and grain. You hear sandals dragging, the creak of ropes pulling loads toward storage pits. The smell of sweat is heavy now, salted and sharp, mixing with the sweet undertone of straw. A boy trips under his small load, spilling grain. He freezes, expecting anger, but his father just sighs. "Pick it up, quickly." His voice is stern but steady. Together they scrape the kernels back, every handful precious. You crouch down too, fingers brushing the grit, realizing this harvest isn't just food, it's survival measured kernel by kernel. Nearby, a group works at threshing. Cattle trudge in slow circles, their hooves crushing stalks on the hard-packed ground. Dust rises in lazy spirals, coating eyelashes, settling in hair until everyone looks powdered like they've walked through flour. A man coughs, spitting grit, then shrugs. "Better than sand in your teeth," he mutters. You can't help but think, honestly, that's debatable. Children play at the edge of the threshing floor, tossing broken stalks at each other like makeshift spears. One girl yells, "I'm Pharaoh," and parades with a reed crown. Her brother collapses in mock defeat. The adults laugh, one shaking his head. "Start them young," he says. You think of how play and work blur here. No separate boxes, just one flow of life where even games mimic survival. A sudden breeze sweeps across the field, lifting chaff into the air. It swirls in golden flecks, catching the sun so it looks like sparks flying in daylight. You blink as the particles stick to your lashes, tickle your nose. Someone sneezes violently. "Bless you," a neighbor calls, though in truth the phrase belongs centuries ahead. Still, the sentiment fits. Everyone laughs again, the sound rolling like a wave across the dust. Later the farmers gather to eat. Not feasts, not temple banquets, but the farmer's portion. Rough bread broken with calloused fingers, onions peeled and bitten into raw, their bite sharp enough to sting your nose. And maybe a handful of dried fish. The smell is pungent, salty, hitting harder than any modern protein bar. Yet when you bite, the flavor is strong, energizing. the crunch satisfying against the chew of bread. A farmer grins at your expression. Good, yes? You nod, mouth too full to answer. One woman opens a small pot of pickled radishes, the vinegar sharp enough to clear your sinuses. She offers you one. You hesitate but accept, crunching down as everyone watches, grinning. Your eyes water, but you force a smile. They burst out laughing, delighted. Humor, you realize, is always tastier when someone else does the chewing. As the meal winds down, talk turns to Pharaoh's taxes. A man mutters, "Half of this will go straight into storehouses." His neighbor shrugs. Better than famine. But a younger one argues, better for whom? The group falls into a rhythm of debate, voices rising and falling like the creak of a water wheel. Historians still debate, a scribe sitting nearby murmurs, whether these levies starved the farmer or saved the land. His words float like dust, unanswered, but impossible to ignore. The sun has tipped past its peak now. Shadows lengthening, heat shifting from searing to smothering. You wipe your brow with a corner of cloth, skin sticky with sweat, dust clinging like an extra layer. Still the rhythm continues, bundles tied, stalks crushed, grains sifted. Every gesture feels ancient, permanent, etched deeper than stone carvings. One last exchange catches your ear. A boy gnawing bread asks his grandmother, "Why do we always eat onions?" She chuckles, eyes wrinkling like dried figs. "Because they make the body strong." Even the men building pyramids ate onions by the handful. She pauses, smiling slyly. "And because they keep your friends away when your breath is bad." The child laughs so hard he drops his bread in the dust. By late afternoon, the field slows. Tools are laid aside, baskets stacked. The workers stretch their backs, groaning in relief, and lean into the soft hum of cicadas. You sink with them, breath heavy, head buzzing faintly from the beer still lingering in your veins. The day has been carved from sweat, bread and onions, and though you've eaten, it feels like only a piece of the whole story, because as the farmers rest, something else begins stirring in the distance, meat crackling, smoke curling, a richer scent that promises feasts reserved not for fields but for gatherings where community and hunger meet flame. You step away from the crunch of straw and the burn of onion on your tongue, and the soundscape changes. Not silence, but the softer chaos of children allowed to roam after chores. The air shifts here too. Instead of the thick musk of sweat and barley dust, you catch the sweetness of smoke, trailing from a distant fire mixed with the sharpness of green herbs crushed under careless feet. It feels cooler in the shade of a mud brick wall where children cluster, though the sun still glances off their shaved heads like tiny mirrors. A giggle erupts sharp and sudden, followed by a scuffle over something round and pale. A boy lifts it high, a boiled egg already chipped, yolk glaring like sunrise. "Mine first," he crows. A girl counters, "Not unless you share the salt," and brandishes a little clay pinch pot. The egg breaks between them, and laughter spills faster than yolk. You realize their bites aren't just about hunger, but play, ritual. A miniature theater where food is currency and bragging rights. The crunch of young teeth on hard bread is everywhere, like stones striking each other in rhythm. It's a soundtrack as steady as cicadas, punctuated by the occasional squeal when someone gets the prize. A date tucked into the bread for luck. You chew along and the crust nearly chips a tooth. Modern braces? Forget it. You'd be finished before you started. A toddler waddles over with a piece of dried fish almost bigger than his head, salt crusted so thick you can smell it before he arrives. His sister tries to trade a handful of lentils, which scatter like marbles into the dust. He refuses, hugging the fish to his chest like it's a stuffed animal. "He'll stink worse than the goats by evening," a nearby mother mutters with fondness. The scene buzzes with comparisons to recess at school. Lunchboxes traded, snacks guarded, the hierarchy decided by who has the good stuff. Only here the stakes are a little sharper. You bite too slow, you lose your share. The bread tastes rough, barley clinging to your gums, but then someone presses a sliver of melon into your palm, cool as river water against your skin. Its sweetness is startling, almost luxurious, like finding a cold soda at the bottom of a hiking pack. Children suck the juice straight from the rind, their chins glossy with drips, wiping on each other's tunics without shame. "Did you know," one boy whispers conspiratorially, "the pharaoh once gave melons as gifts to his soldiers?" His friend snorts, "Better than onions every day." You chuckle. It's history told like playground gossip. Indeed, soldiers were often paid in bread, beer, and onions. And yes, melons did appear in offerings, carved carefully in tombs. Historians still debate whether these fruits were everyday staples or reserved luxuries. But in this moment, the melon feels like treasure, passed hand to hand with sticky reverence. Nearby, an older child cracks open a small clay jar, releasing the nutty scent of chickpeas stewed with garlic. The paste is thick, scooped with broken bread. Taste, he offers. You do. And it's grainy but oddly comforting, clinging to your tongue like peanut butter's ancestor. You imagine ancient parents inventing snack packs long before supermarkets. A grandmother leans against the wall, her shadow stretching long. She hands out slices of radish, sharp enough to make your nose twitch. Keeps you awake, she declares. The children groan, biting anyway, their faces puckering like cartoon characters. You laugh, wiping tears as the sting creeps into your own sinuses. The smell of smoke drifts closer now, meat cooking somewhere, fat hissing onto embers. Children's noses lift instinctively, their chatter punctuated by longing sighs. One boy whispers, "Maybe tonight there will be goose." Another shakes his head. "Dream on." It's beans again. The chorus of complaints is timeless, identical to modern kids stuck with broccoli while dreaming of pizza. Someone begins a game, tossing flatbread discs like frisbees. They fly lopsided, catching sun before thudding into the dust. A goat charges after one, victorious as it chews the prize. The children collapse laughing, their energy rising again despite the heat. The day presses on, the light harsher, but here in the shade, time stretches. You find yourself caught between bites of rough bread and smooth melon, between the sharp radish sting and the sweetness of gossip. The children's bites are small, but their world is vast. Part hunger, part game, part rehearsal for adulthood. As you lick a final smear of chickpea paste from your thumb, you hear the first sharper crackle of firewood catching strong. The signal that the next meal will not be scraped from jars or pinched from pockets, but lifted whole from the flames. The promise of roasted meat beckons rich and smoky, drawing you forward. The laughter of children fades behind you, replaced by the quieter, steadier rhythm of men preparing for the river. The Nile greets you with a low shimmer, its surface rippling under the lazy push of dawn winds. The air smells different here, cooler, briny, with that faint metallic tang you recognize from holding a coin too long in your hand. Nets lie coiled like sleeping snakes across the sand, their cords rough and damp. A fisherman hums under his breath, half lullaby, half prayer, while another spits into his palms and tests the tension of a line. Careful. Don't snap it, one warns. It's tougher than my mother-in-law, the other shoots back, earning a round of muffled chuckles. Their voices carry over the water like drifting oars, softened by the slap of waves against reed boats pulled to shore. A boy crouches at the edge, poking at minnows with a stick. He squeals when one flicks water into his eye. You can feel the cool spray on your own skin, a relief after the dust and heat of the fields. The morning has a kind of hush, not silent but concentrated, like the pause before a conductor raises his baton. You step into a boat, its floor sticky with old fish scales that glitter faintly in the rising light, like sequins spilled across a stage. The wood is warm where the sun has already touched it, cool where the shadows linger. The boat rocks gently and you grip the edge. No seatbelts here. If you fall in, you're the entertainment for the crocodiles. Don't lean too far, stranger, a fisherman teases. We haven't paid the ferryman yet. The men laugh and you force a smile, trying not to imagine sharp teeth waiting under the current. A basket thumps beside you, full of bait. It smells sharp, fermented. A punch to the nose like leaving forgotten leftovers in a fridge. Best catfish don't mind stink, the owner says, shrugging. You believe him. The nets go out with a slap, spreading across the water in arcs that catch the sunlight. Ripples fold over them like liquid glass. The men work with a rhythm honed by repetition. Cast, wait, pull, reset. Their arms glisten, muscles defined more by survival than vanity. No gym memberships, just an endless subscription to necessity. The first tug comes quick. The line jerks, the net writhes, and soon silver bodies flash, twisting, splashing, desperate to return to freedom. One leaps high, scales scattering droplets like jewels before landing with a slap that echoes. The boat tilts with the weight, water licking your sandals. You cling tighter. Fish smell is immediate, pungent, raw. The air fills with it as they pile the catch into baskets, their gills flaring, mouths opening and closing, as if still trying to speak. A boy leans close to one, whispers, "Tell me secrets of the deep," before getting flicked across the face by a tail. Everyone roars. You join in, half horrified, half amused. The Nile, giver of life, also seems to have a sense of humor. You think about history while they work. The Battle of Kadesh comes to mind. Ramses II declaring victory even when the outcome was, let's say, unclear. Soldiers who might have once eaten bread and onions by the river, now remembered in stone reliefs showing chariots and glory. Meanwhile, their descendants are still here, netting fish with the same patience, no audience but gulls. Historians still debate the actual results of that battle. But the certainty here is simpler. Catch enough fish, feed your family. An unusual fact surfaces in your mind too. Sometimes fish were mummified as offerings to the gods, wrapped carefully, placed in tombs. Imagine trying to explain that at a modern supermarket checkout. Yes, I'll take these tilapia. Could you gift wrap them for eternity, please? The sun climbs higher, burning mist away. Heat presses down, but the breeze off the water cools your skin. You notice how the men shift with it. Loosened tunics, wet cloths slapped against necks. Sweat and river water blur into one. A fisherman offers you a bite from his pouch, dried mullet, tough as leather, salty enough to make your lips sting. You chew, jaw aching. But the taste grows on you, sharp, bracing, strangely satisfying. Fuel, he says simply. You nod, mouth too full to reply. Nearby, a boy fishes with nothing but a string and bent reed hook. His face lights up when he pulls in a wriggling catch the size of your hand. "Bigger than yours!" He shouts at the men. They laugh, letting him have his triumph. For him, this is breakfast and bragging rights rolled into one. The boats drift together, oars dipping lazily. Conversations weave between them. Complaints about taxes, jokes about wives, debates over which bend of the river hides the fattest catfish. Their voices rise and fall like another current, pulling you into the flow. You hear the flapping of wings overhead, ibises and herons circling, waiting for scraps. Their calls cut through the chatter, sharp and echoing. The fishermen toss small fish to them now and then, gestures half generosity, half superstition. "Keep them happy, they tell Thoth we're good men," someone mutters. The sun finally asserts itself, glaring off the water, dazzling your eyes. Shadows shorten. The Nile smells heavier now, mud-stirred, fish blood mixing with reeds. It's not unpleasant exactly, just dense, earthy, alive. The baskets fill. Strips of fish already hang drying on racks near the shore, darkened by salt and air. Smoke curls from huts further inland, where some catches are already being cooked. As the boat noses back toward land, the men hum again, a low tune that blends with the splash of oars. You find yourself swaying with it, your head drowsy in the heat. Stepping ashore, you feel the sand burn under your feet, the world tilting slightly after the rocking boat. The smell of fish clings to you in hair, on skin, in clothes, souvenir stronger than any trinket. The fishermen unload, baskets thudding against the earth, cats darting to snatch scraps. Children swarm, eyes bright for the promise of grilled flesh or salted strips. And somewhere deeper inland, that smoke of roasting meat thickens, darker, richer. The Nile has fed the morning. Now the village fire will feed the day. The river breeze still lingers on your skin, carrying that faint metallic tang of fish and wet reeds. But the soundscape shifts as you leave the boats behind. Instead of oars slapping water, you hear reeds scratching papyrus, the squeak of styluses dipped in ink made from soot and gum. The smell changes too. Fish musk fades into the dry, chalky scent of parchment, mixed with beeswax candles softening in the heat. You step into a shaded portico, where a man sits cross-legged at a low table, his posture both stiff and relaxed, like someone who has practiced for so long that discomfort has become its own kind of furniture. The scribe barely glances at you, lips moving as he murmurs words to himself, quill scratching across pale sheets. His table is covered not with food, but with rolls of papyrus tied in neat bundles, small pots of ink, and the occasional crumb of flatbread abandoned between lines. He notices you staring at it. "It's breakfast," he says dryly, nudging the crumb with his nail. "That's barely a bite," you answer. "Enough to remind me I'm human," he replies with a grin, returning to his work. The air here feels cooler than the sunlit fields, shaded by mud brick walls, but it carries its own heaviness. Dust, ink, and the faint oil of drying reeds. A fly buzzes near your ear, then lands on the rim of his ink pot. dipping like it wants to try calligraphy. The scribe swats it away, muttering something about insects aspiring to bureaucracy. You lean closer, catching sight of the text, lists of rations, names of workers, shipments of fish and bread. This is the pantry of an entire city, written down instead of piled high. You realize quickly, the scribe doesn't just write. He decides who eats what, when, and how much. In a world of onions and barley, that's real power. Your stomach growls and he smirks. Yes, yes. Everything about food eventually ends up here. He reaches for another scroll and casually mentions a detail you didn't expect. Workers on the Great Pyramid were given rations of bread, beer and onions daily, not just as pay but as fuel. You picture thousands of stone haulers marching like marathon runners, except their energy gels are onions that make your eyes water just thinking about it. Historians still debate, the scribe adds, whether the rations were generous or just enough to keep rebellion at bay. He dips his stylus again, and you hear the scratch, like a cricket chirping in rhythm. The sound is oddly soothing, like white noise. He waves you closer to a jar by his table. Inside, slices of dried dates and a smear of honey cling to the sides. For visitors, he says. You reach in, fingers sticky instantly, and the sweetness explodes on your tongue, cutting through the lingering fish taste from earlier. A sip of cool water follows, poured from a clay jug that sweats against your palm. Better than beer? He asks. Depends how much you had last night, you shoot back, and he chuckles. The kind of laugh that escapes before he can stop it. A young apprentice sits nearby, laboring over a line of hieratic script, tongue poking from the corner of his mouth. His reed pen squeaks louder than the scribe's. Plotch is dotting the page. You wrote oxen again, the elder points out. It was supposed to be offering, the boy mumbles, cheeks red. At least they both end up eaten, you add. The boy stares, then snorts, ink smudging his nose. Here at the scribe's table, breakfast is not so much eaten as catalogued. The tally of bread loaves alone could feed half the city for a week, or feed gossip for twice as long. As the elder rolls one scroll closed, he sets another open, revealing sketches of fish, ducks, and even cucumbers. We record everything, he explains. Even what priests pretend is holy but is really just lunch. The detail that surprises you most is how specific it gets. Dates from a certain orchard, beer from a certain vat, onions counted by hand, radishes measured by bundle. It's as if the gods themselves demanded itemized receipts, and in some ways they did. Offerings to the temples weren't just tossed on altars. They were weighed, logged, confirmed. That meant scribes like him became guardians of truth, or at least of accounting. Imagine your bank teller also being your priest, your tax officer, and your grocery store clerk all rolled into one. He tells you an unusual fact. Some scribes were known to receive part of their wages in bread shaped like animals, tiny dough crocodiles, little hippos. Children would laugh while eating them, but the symbolism lingered, nourishment mingling with myth. You try to picture biting into a pastry shaped like Sobek, the crocodile god, and decide that's one way to keep kids respectful at mealtime. The scribe sighs, leaning back. His eyes flicker toward the window where sunlight shifts across the courtyard, warming the edge of his table. Outside, the smoke of roasting meat curls higher, the scent sneaking even into this sanctuary of ink and papyrus. Your own stomach reminds you again that parchment and honey only go so far. The boy notices your glance. Oh, you're like the goose, he whispers. The elder shakes his head. Too rich for this hour. Too tempting to ignore, you counter. He doesn't disagree. The scratching resumes, steady, hypnotic. You realize that the rhythm of breakfast here is not chewing or sipping, but writing, as if the act itself feeds something deeper. Words fill bellies as surely as bread, at least for those who hold the stylus. But the breeze shifts again, carrying with it the undeniable perfume of meat dripping fat onto coals, that sizzling chorus louder than any scratching pen. Your eyes wander to the courtyard, where shadows already flicker red with flame. The scribe notices your distraction, smirks, and sets his reed pen down. Go then. Records will keep themselves, but don't forget, every bite you take will end up here. You step away, fingers still sticky from honey, ears still echoing with the scratch of ink, and stomach already lured toward the smoke. The day, it seems, is ready to move from parchment to fire. The scribe's courtyard still hums faintly behind you, the scent of ink lingering like charcoal smudged across your fingertips. But the path soon narrows, lined with sandstone walls cooled by morning shadows. A hush seems to settle here, as if the air itself remembers it has entered holy space. The smell shifts first, less of roasting goose, more of incense, sharp and resinous, the kind that catches in your nose and makes you sneeze at the least reverent moment. Ahead, a low temple doorway waits, its lintel etched with gods who never skip breakfast, though you are about to meet men who often do. The stone feels colder beneath your feet, shadows heavier, as though silence weighs more than sunlight. A priest brushes past, robes whispering like reeds in the breeze, and his stomach growls audibly enough that you nearly mistake it for a sacred chant. You can't help yourself, you grin. Here in the heart of ritual, food is deliberately set aside. You've just stepped from the chatter of scribes cataloguing dates and onions into a chamber where fasting is both duty and offering. And it makes you realize there's devotion. And then there's trying not to think about bread when someone's waving incense smoke in your face. The walls breathe coolness. Torches flicker, but struggle against the late morning sun leaking through high slits. Stripes of light falling across floor tiles in uneven bars. The smell of burning frankincense is thick, mingling with the faint odor of yesterday's offerings. Beer spilled and sour, bread stale and cracked, fruit sagging at the edges. If the fisherman's air carried salt and the scribe's air carried dust, here the air itself seems weighted with rules. You pause near a stone basin where water trickles, the sound delicate, like fingers tapping a shallow drum. A priest dips his hand, splashing his face, muttering under his breath, "Not food, not yet. Not until the gods are fed." His colleague chuckles, whispering back, "Tell that to my stomach." It's already singing hymns, you snort, earning a glance. But even their own discipline cracks into humor sometimes. The temple fast is strict. Priests often abstain until rituals are complete, eating only after the gods have been offered bread, beer, and meat. You glance at the offering table now, a long slab laden with food too perfect to touch, loaves shaped like ducks, honey cakes stacked in pyramids, even a roasted goose steaming gently. The smell is enough to test any mortal vow. One young priest leans close, sighing dramatically. "If I stare long enough, maybe the goose will walk into my mouth." His elder frowns, replies with dry authority, "Then you'll be remembered as the first man eaten by his own lunch." You bite your lip to keep laughter quiet, but it spills anyway. The contrast between abundance and restraint is almost comedic. Here's a banquet of bread and fruit, yet you watch men bowing and chanting, their eyes carefully sliding away from the food as though it were a beautiful stranger they're not allowed to acknowledge. It's not unlike scrolling through dessert photos online while promising yourself you'll stick to salad. The chanting builds, low, rhythmic, steady, the kind of hum that makes your bones feel like tuning forks. Smoke curls upward, filling the rafters, hiding the painted stars above. The priest leading the rite raises his hands, voice rising with formal authority. He recites hymns to Ra, the sun god, whose journey across the sky is the very reason mornings exist at all. Widely known is the Great Feast of Opet, when priests led processions of Amun's statue through Thebes and offerings overflowed, reminders that ritual and food have always been entangled. But here now the smaller act of simply not eating while chanting seems equally monumental. You shift your weight, the stone floor cool through your sandals, your stomach giving a sympathetic grumble. You wonder how long you'd last here before sneaking a bite. Probably less than the time it takes to light one stick of incense. The offerings glisten in the half-light, figs split open to show their jeweled interiors, barley bread cracked in golden crusts, wine jars sweating slightly as though chilled. Yet the priest's mouth stays sealed, their discipline woven into every syllable. It strikes you that devotion here isn't about feasting, but about hunger, about the strength to give what you most want to gods who never have to diet. One unusual fact catches your eye. Priests of certain temples shaved their entire bodies, not only for cleanliness, but to avoid offending the gods with stray hair. Imagine fasting and being hairless in the desert sun, basically the world's least fun spa package. Historians still debate whether all priests followed this extreme regimen, or only those in the higher ranks. But the image sticks with you, and you almost shiver as a draft slips along the temple floor, cool as fingers trailing your skin. Another priest walks past carrying a tray piled with bread, the smell rising like a wave of temptation. He mutters to himself, for the gods," like a mantra, and you wonder if repeating it is the only way to stop himself from tearing into it mid-step. You lean toward him, whispering conspiratorially. Looks heavy, need help? He shoots you a side-eye sharp enough to cut papyrus. Do not jest with sacred loaves. But his lips twitch in spite of himself. The moment hangs, smoke curling, chants echoing. The fast stretches on until at last the offerings are laid, hymns complete, and silence settles like dust after a storm. Only then do the priests gather aside, quietly breaking their own fast with measured bites. Dates passed hand to hand, bread dipped in beer, the simplest foods tasting profound after such restraint. One man sighs happily. Even onions taste divine after prayers. Another chuckles. Speak not of onions in sacred halls. You can't resist adding, too late. You already did. Their laughter breaks the solemnity for a moment, rippling through the chamber like water through reeds. You chew the thought along with them. Hunger is not only endured but transformed, a bridge between human and divine. And though your own stomach still growls at the untouched goose, you feel oddly full, not with food but with the rhythm of ritual. The strange nourishment of patience. Outside, the sunlight sharpens, the air warmer, and you realize the temple shadow is thinning. The smoke clings to your clothes as you step back toward the open world, and the faint strains of laughter follow. Somewhere beyond these walls, the marketplace is stirring. It smells far less restrained, grilled meat, fried cakes, wine spilled without apology, and so you drift onward, the quiet echo of fasting behind you, the noisy promise of markets ahead. The sunlight hits you like a cymbal crash, bright and loud after the hush of incense. You squint, eyes adjusting from smoky twilight to streets that shimmer with heat already rising from stone. The air is no longer disciplined or reverent. It is crowded, noisy and unapologetically full of smells. Meat sizzling, garlic crushed under knife blades, beer yeasty and frothing like impatient waves. This is no place for restraint. The market before midday is the Nile distilled into chaos and color. All its fish and figs and gossip jammed into lanes where elbows are currency and shouting is art. The sound is immediate. Hawkers singing prices in rhythms so fast they sound like auctioneers on double espresso. You pass a man waving a duck by its wings, squawking in protest, while his rival smacks a side of salted beef to prove its worth. Children dart between baskets piled high with dates, their sticky fingers reaching before coins do. You realize quickly, if the temple asked you to fast, the market dares you to overeat. You catch the scent of onions frying in oil, sharp and sweet, cutting through the musk of sheep wool and the earthy rot of vegetables past their prime. A boy runs past carrying garlic strings twice his height, dragging like parade banners, and you can't help imagining him as the world's least intimidating superhero. A vendor thrusts a basket toward you, figs spilling like jewels. Taste, she demands. You bite. It bursts syrup across your tongue, sweet enough to coat your teeth. She grins. Better than gold, no? You reply, gold doesn't stick between your molars. She cackles, waving you on. The crowd pulses. You hear pottery clinking, sandals slapping stone, donkeys braying as if offended by all the human noise. Heat presses against your back like a wool blanket you didn't ask for. But every breeze sneaking through carries new temptation. Honey cakes crisped at the edges, fish grilled over palm coals, beer poured foamy and warm into clay cups. You pause at a butcher's stall, watching him carve with such precision. It's like papyrus calligraphy with knives. He glances up, smirks. Hungry. You answer. Always. He laughs, handing you a sliver of liver still steaming. The taste is rich, metallic, and you immediately think this is what iron supplements wish they were. Nearby, a woman argues with a spice seller, shaking a pouch of cumin like a maraca. It was fuller yesterday. You sneezed half of it away, he counters. Then sell me the half I sneezed. You nearly choke on laughter, earning side-eyes from the goat tethered beside you, who seems less amused than everyone else. The market is more than trade. It's theater. Stories are currency too. One man swears his dates grew sweeter under a full moon. Another insists his beer tastes better because he sings to the jars. You nod, pretending to believe both, though one sip of the beer convinces you the jars must not like his singing much. And in this swirl of goods and gossip, history breathes. You hear someone mention the reign of Ramses II, the famous pharaoh whose building project swallowed stone like this. Market swallows figs. Widely known is his grand battle at Kadesh against the Hittites, carved into temple walls as the greatest victory. though many suspect it was closer to a draw. In fact, historians still debate whether Ramses actually won or simply had the best PR team in ancient stone. You chuckle, realizing spin doctors existed long before hashtags, as you nibble on bread sprinkled with coriander. You overhear another odd fact. One vendor insists his grandmother swore that crocodile dung was once used as birth control. He says it proudly, like a family heirloom recipe, while his neighbor rolls his eyes and mutters, "Historians still debate your grandmother's wisdom." You cough, trying not to choke on coriander crumbs, but secretly marvel at how practical or desperate people once were. The sun climbs higher, shadows shrinking into thin slits under stalls covered in woven mats. Sweat runs down your back, the kind that makes linen cling, and you envy the men fanning themselves with palm fronds shaped like giant spoons. You join a line where flatbreads are slapped against hot clay domes, puffing and blistering in seconds. The smell is irresistible, smoky, nutty, alive. A woman hands you one, so hot you juggle it between palms, and she laughs. "Dance, stranger, dance." You do, hopping like a tourist on a beach forgetting sandburns. Nearby, a troupe of musicians bangs drums and claps rhythms to draw customers. Children squeal, women sway their hips, even the donkeys bob their heads grudgingly in time. You tap your foot, chewing your bread, thinking how this beat could remix nicely into modern EDM. A man sidles up, whispering, "Best beer in Memphis, don't tell the priests." He hands you a clay cup, frothing golden. You sip, its warm, sour sweet, oddly comforting. He grins. "Good, yes?" You nod. "Better than goose walking into my mouth." He laughs, clearly in on the temple joke without even knowing it. The longer you wander, the more the market feels like a river itself, currents pulling you from one stall to another, eddies of gossip, rapids of laughter. At one turn, you nearly collide with a basket of live pigeons, fluttering skyward in chaos. Feathers stick to your sweaty arm and you mutter, "Free souvenir," brushing them off. By midday, the market throbs at its loudest. Prices shouted louder, bargaining sharper. Food smells so thick they feel chewable in the air. A man juggling pomegranates draws cheers until one splatters spectacularly, juice spraying everyone nearby. "A blessing from the gods," he declares, wiping his sticky hands on your sleeve. You groan, but his grin is too infectious to stay annoyed. It's a carnival of hunger and humor, a place where restraint has no seat, and appetite is celebrated shamelessly. And as you lick breadcrumbs from your fingers, the clamor shifts. The hum of drums, the smell of roasting lamb, the sight of people gathering in one direction. Something larger brews ahead, a collective meal that goes beyond commerce, the feast that midday promises. The drums still throb in the air as you let yourself be carried in the same direction as the crowd, toward the place where the smell of yeast rises warmer and thicker than incense ever could. The sunlight sharpens against pale limestone blocks, reflecting in a glare so bright it feels as if the air itself is sweating. You shield your eyes, squinting at the enormous wall rising ahead, stone stacked in an order so precise you can almost hear the click of each block fitting into place. You're at the edge of the workyards now, where men with shoulders the size of oxen and hands dusted white with flour are not soldiers or priests, but bakers, sweating harder than the masons themselves. The bread they make is not artful like a banquet loaf, but industrial. Slabs, discs, and bricks meant to keep bellies firm enough to lift mountains of stone. The soundscape here is a layered chorus. The clang of chisels in the distance, the hollow thump of kneading, the hiss of hot ash stirred off ovens, and always the chatter of workers who seem to talk and chew at the same time. One man waves half a loaf at you as if it were a scroll of law. "Best barley bread this side of Memphis," he declares, crumbs flying. Another replies, mouthful, "Better than chewing the dust of the pharaoh's boots, eh?" They laugh, the kind of laugh that turns hunger into solidarity. The smell is heavy and earthy, almost beery, like someone tried to make a bakery inside a brewery. And in a sense, that's exactly what these loaves are. Fermented doughs, bubbling with wild yeasts, baked in conical molds thrust into coals until the crust hardens, into something that could stop a sling stone. You break off a piece. Too hot, you juggle it between your fingers, and taste what every builder of every pyramid once tasted, chewy, smoky, filling. It's not exactly croissant-level flaky, but it carries the comfort of certainty. And here comes the joke of history. For all the glamour of golden sarcophagi, most Egyptian workers lived on beer and bread. Pyramids were not so much raised by slaves in chains as by men fueled on carbohydrates and yeast, an ancient carb-loading program that any modern marathoner would envy. Imagine a personal trainer today telling you, eat 10 loaves a day, chase it with beer, and go lift 2-ton blocks. You'd probably switch gyms. Still, it works. The builders' bodies gleam with sweat, and the bread keeps appearing, as if the ovens themselves were small pyramids exhaling endless offerings. You watch one boy, barely tall enough to carry a basket, stagger under the weight of steaming loaves toward a line of men waiting their ration. "Don't drop it." Someone calls and he yells back, "Then you carry it." The teasing slides easily into rhythm, a chant as natural as hammer and chisel. Historians still debate whether these great building crews were permanent teams of skilled workers or rotating groups of conscripts. But what you see in their laughter and banter suggests something closer to a family than a forced gang. Bread does that, it equalizes. No matter how high the pyramid rises, every worker chews the same coarse crumb, wiping the same grit from his teeth. You crouch by the oven pits, feeling the sudden flare of heat that reddens your cheeks. The bakers plunge their arms into baskets of dough, forearms glazed in sticky paste, then slap the lumps into clay molds. They shove them into embers with long sticks, the hiss and crackle sounding like applause. One man grins at you, sweat dripping off his chin. Don't look so shocked. This is how gods are fed too, only theirs comes with honey. His companion adds, and we're the ones who bake it for them. Maybe they should be bowing to us. The laughter that follows smells of warm yeast and mild rebellion. You glance at the blocks towering nearby and realize that this bread is more than fuel. It is architecture. Without it, no wall, no temple, no tomb would rise. Bread is mortar, invisible but essential. Even Herodotus, centuries later, would write of the vast rations given to workers here, though he might have exaggerated numbers the way a fisherman exaggerates fish size. Still, the truth remains. Bread built empires. The sun climbs higher, burning the nape of your neck, and the workers crouch in the little shade cast by baskets. They dunk torn pieces into jars of beer so cloudy, it looks like breakfast oatmeal. You try a sip, and yes, it tastes like someone forgot to finish brewing. Grainy, sour, fizzy. It's less a drink than liquid bread. A mason nearby chuckles. Don't make that face. Drink enough, you won't taste it anymore. He winks. Tooth-gapped, and adds, that's the point. It's here you notice an odd custom. Some men tuck spare loaves into their linen belts, letting them harden in the sun until they could double as tools. One even uses a stale heel to sand the edge of a block. You raise an eyebrow and he shrugs. Waste nothing. Bread works harder than chisels sometimes. It's absurd. But you can't argue with the smooth corner he reveals. And because Egypt can never resist a touch of myth, you overhear another story. One baker swears that the god Khnum, shaper of bodies, needs dough in the same way he needs clay for human limbs. His friend interrupts. If that's true, then my left arm is definitely undercooked. You laugh into your hand, trying not to choke on barley crumbs. The heat intensifies, shimmering above the stone, and the bread lines stretch long. But no one complains, because each loaf is more than food. It's a wage. You can almost imagine the accounting scribes nearby, tallying not in coins but in bread marks, each line a mouth satisfied. Payment in calories, payment in chew. Of course, not every loaf is equal. Some are mixed with dates or figs for the overseers, sweetened in a way that makes ordinary workers glance sideways. You catch one man muttering, "A crumb for me, a cake for him." Fair as the Nile's flood. The bitterness in his tone sticks longer than the bread between your teeth. The ovens crackle, the hammers ring, the laughter echoes, and through it all, you sense the scale of history pulsing. These builders may never know their names will vanish into dust, but their bread ensures stone will stand for millennia. Each chew is a step toward eternity. The day wears on and the baskets empty into mouths, leaving only crumbs for sparrows. Your stomach tightens again, not from hunger, but from the realization that bread alone cannot sustain forever. You lick the last smear of grainy paste from your lips and look to where the crowd drifts once more, toward a different kind of feast. The smoke curling upward now is not from ovens, but from something richer, fattier, promising flavors that barley bread could never dream of. And so you rise, brushing crumbs from your hands, following the smell that grows heavier, darker, the kind that clings to clothes and lingers on the skin like memory. Because bread may build pyramids, but meat, that will summon gods and men alike to the same fire. The smell of roasting meat is still tugging at you, smoky and insistent, but instead of following the tide of the crowd into the great fire pits, you find yourself slipping sideways into a shaded alley. The sun is too hot, the noise too loud, and your stomach, already heavy with bread, wants something gentler. You stumble into a small courtyard where the air cools a little, shaded by mud brick walls and a single sycamore fig tree leaning like an old uncle against the sun. The courtyard is hushed, except for the soft cooing of doves overhead and the occasional splash of a jug being tilted. Here the meal is quieter, slower, the kind of eating that fills more with peace than with protein. You hear the creak of a wicker chair, the clink of a clay cup, the whisper of linen against the stone bench. The smells are different here too. Not the smoky tang of charred goat, but the fresh brightness of cucumbers sliced open, the sweet grassiness of leeks, the faint sour lift of pickled radishes. A woman lays out dishes on a reed mat, moving with the rhythm of someone who has done this so many times that her hands could prepare lunch, even if her mind wandered away. She glances up at you and smiles. "Too much noise out there?" she asks. You nod and she laughs gently. "Sit then." Food tastes better without shouting. On the mat is a spread that would never feed a pyramid crew, but feels like abundance nonetheless. Bowls of lentils slick with oil, onions roasted until their skins crackle like paper. A plate of dates so glossy they catch the light like marbles. There's bread too, flatter this time. Round discs charred at the edges, more forgiving on the teeth than the workman's ration. You tear a piece, dip it into the lentils and feel the softness melt against your tongue. Compared to the builder's bread, this is luxury. Still humble, but with the kindness of being made for taste, not labor. The courtyard carries its own music. Somewhere beyond the wall, a lute thrums faintly like someone plucking at a nap in progress. A breeze stirs dust into spirals cool against your skin. The doves coo one after another, like gossip passed around in feathered voices. It's domestic, ordinary, the kind of meal you might forget tomorrow but would miss if it were gone. A boy darts in from the street carrying a jug of beer, not the cloudy gruel of the worksite, but lighter, cleaner, brewed for sipping instead of gulping. He places it down with exaggerated importance. "For the guest," he declares. His mother ruffles his hair. "You're not old enough to drink it yourself," he frowns. "I was just carrying it." The way he says it, you can tell he's rehearsing for the day. He'll be allowed to tilt the cup himself. And here comes one of those details you'd never expect. The onions you're chewing, sweet, almost candied, were once believed to be sacred. So much so that priests wore them as amulets. Imagine walking into your local supermarket with an onion dangling from your necklace and saying, "Yes, it's for protection." The cashier would definitely switch lines. Yet here it feels natural, the idea that flavor could guard the body, that meals might shield as well as fill. A neighbor slips in through the gate carrying a small clay bowl. Inside are figs cut in halves, glistening with honey. "Try this," she urges. "It's the best from my tree." She sets it down with pride, as if each fig were a jewel plucked from the Nile itself. You take one, the honey sticking to your fingers, the fruit collapsing softly between your teeth. She watches you, waiting. "Good?" You nod enthusiastically, and she beams as though she herself invented figs. The courtyard's quietness makes you aware of time stretching differently. Out in the marketplace, minutes sprinted with the noise. Here they stroll. You feel yourself slowing too, chewing longer, noticing the grain of the bread, the thin crack in the jug, the way light falls in stripes across the reed mat. It's like an ancient ASMR session, minus the ring light. Historians still debate whether these smaller domestic meals were truly leisurely, or whether every bite was eaten with one ear tuned for the overseer's shout. But here in this courtyard, you sense that for at least a little while time belonged to the eaters. There's no hurry in the way they share food, pass dates, or let a joke linger. One man leans back belly full and sighs. "If the pharaoh eats better than this, then may his reign be long." His wife retorts, "The pharaoh doesn't eat my lentils." He grins. That's why he built pyramids, to make up for it. The laughter that follows is soft but genuine, the kind of humor that rests easily on a full stomach. You glance upward and catch sight of the doves again, now perched in pairs, feathers puffed against the glare. Their soft coos mix with the clatter of a passing donkey cart on the street beyond. A reminder that life outside the walls still moves fast and loud. But for now you're inside, chewing slowly, sipping lightly, savoring food meant not for work but for restoration. It strikes you how different this meal feels from the one you just left. Bread for the builders was communal necessity. Bread here is companionship. Out there, laughter echoed across blocks of stone. In here, it hums like a lullaby under the sycamore's shade. And yet both feed Egypt, each in their own way. You lean back, wiping honey from your fingers, feeling the clay wall cool against your shoulders. The courtyard meal is nearly done, but the peace lingers, wrapping around you like linen sheets after a long day. For all the grandeur of Egypt, it's these quiet courtyards that keep its heart beating, one slow bite at a time. And just as your eyelids begin to feel heavy in the drowsy heat, a faint sound carries from beyond the gate. Drums again. Softer this time, calling people towards something new, something that waits where water runs. The Nile is never far, and soon you'll follow its edge to see what it serves. The drums don't lead you back to the builders or the quiet courtyard. This time they guide your steps to a house whose walls are taller, smoother, and painted brighter than the rest. The gate is carved with lotus blooms, its hinges squeaking faintly as servants swing it open. You step inside and the temperature seems to drop. Shade has been engineered here, not stumbled into. Pools glimmer with still water. Papyrus fronds sway in carefully curated breezes, and the air smells faintly of myrrh. Not sweat, not onions, not clay dust, but wealth. You can practically hear the sound of coins just existing in the silence. The rich man's table is already being laid out. Servants carry in platters bigger than some families' mats. Roasted duck with skin lacquered dark by honey, whole fish gleaming with scales brushed in oil, baskets of bread baked in animal shapes that are far too cute to eat, though you know someone will. You can smell garlic roasted until it's almost candy, coriander dust sharp in the air, and beneath it all that deep smoky undertone of beef ribs charred just right. If the courtyard meal was like a playlist of acoustic lullabies, this table is a full orchestra blasting on surround sound. You hear the scrape of chairs on polished limestone as men and women in linen finer than gauze gather around. Jewelry clinks, a sound like tiny wind chimes as they lean forward. One guest, already sneaking a grape, mutters, "Pharaohs may have their tombs, but we'll have our lunch first." The host chuckles, lifting a jug of wine, yes, wine not beer, imported no less, from vines far up the Nile Delta. He pours generously, the red liquid catching the light like melted rubies. You settle onto a low couch, feeling the cushions sink under you. Across the table, a servant places a tray of figs stuffed with nuts and drizzled with sesame. "Careful," he warns with a smirk. "These vanish faster than you can chew." You pop one into your mouth and nearly agree. It collapses in layers of sweetness, crunch and oil, leaving you both satisfied and greedy. The conversation around the table is as rich as the food. One man boasts about his new papyrus boat. Another jokes that he only sails when sober. So never. A woman leans toward you and whispers, "You're quiet. Is the duck better company?" You grin, mouth full, and she laughs. "Thought so. Everywhere you look, abundance feels exaggerated. Bowls of olives, green, black, wrinkled, glitter with oil like polished stones. Melons sliced open spill bright red flesh against the white plates. Cheese, rare and sharp, crumbles on bread so soft it's almost indecent compared to the builder's crusts. Someone lifts a golden spoon, because apparently fingers weren't fancy enough, and dips it into honey so thick it coils like rope before falling onto a slab of cheese. The combination makes your tongue sing, and here's your fun, slightly bizarre fact. Lettuce, that humble leaf now condemned to limp sandwiches, was in Egypt considered an aphrodisiac. Imagine a rich man leaning across this table with a plate of romaine, whispering, "For your pleasure." Salad bars would never recover. The meal pauses when a servant brings in a new course. Quail roasted whole, heads intact. One guest nudges another. They watch you while you eat them. The reply comes with a grin. "Then let them see me win." The laughter rolls warm. Not cruel, though you catch the flicker of competition in how quickly people tear into the delicate birds. As you sip wine, you can't help but think of the world outside. Just decades ago, during the reign of Akhenaten, entire kitchens were reorganized to worship the sun. Tables like this one were reshaped by politics as much as by appetite. Historians still debate whether meals under that pharaoh were truly simplified, or whether the rich snuck extra ducks under the table while preaching piety. You picture someone hiding a goose under their robe during a religious ceremony and nearly choke on a grape. The host notices and raises a brow. Too much wine. You wave a hand, still coughing. Wrong pipe. He laughs, satisfied, and returns to bragging about his bread ovens that he insists bake loaves softer than clouds. You nod politely, though you know clouds aren't chewy, but let the man enjoy his metaphor. The table grows louder as cups refill. Someone slaps the table after a joke about onions making even the gods weep. Another guest sighs dramatically, claiming his wife feeds him more garlic than love. She smacks his shoulder with a linen napkin, and everyone bursts into laughter. You find yourself drifting in the sound, lulled by the chorus of clinks, sighs, and chewing. Sensory details crowd in. The waxy shine of the oil lamps catching on gold cups, the faint drip of water from the courtyard pool outside, the heat of roasted meat steaming into your face as another platter arrives. It's overwhelming in the best way, like stepping into a buffet where nothing is labeled and everything is free. A servant slides a plate toward you, fresh pomegranate seeds glistening like jewels. Eat, he says softly, before someone else steals them. You lean in, the burst of tart juice startling after so much richness. Across from you, a guest winks. First time? You nod. Careful, he says. You'll dream in red tonight. The truth of the rich man's table is that it's less about food and more about performance. Dishes appear in waves like military parades, each outshining the last. Conversation swells in breaks like the Nile itself. Even silence is part of the show. When the duck arrives, the table hushes, everyone waiting for the host's nod before digging in. You lean back, belly tight, fingers sticky with honey and wine, and realize you've been part of something staged yet strangely human. Luxury here doesn't erase hunger. It dresses it up, gilds it, perfumes it, and makes it loud enough to echo across the riverbanks. And as the final course arrives, sweet cakes shaped like lotus blossoms, sprinkled with dates and sesame, you find your thoughts drifting outward again. Beyond these walls, beyond the servants, beyond the laughter, lies the Nile. Its steady waters don't care about soft couches or golden spoons. And tomorrow morning, those waters will still feed the fishermen before they ever grace a rich man's table. The night lingers heavy with perfume and meat smoke, but your eyes are already sliding toward the river's edge, where simplicity waits in the flicker of torches and the splash of oars. You slip from the heavy sweetness of the banquet hall and step into a space where the air itself seems to tighten, thinner and sharper, as though it's been washed clean by incense. The coolness of stone pushes up through your sandals, and the chatter of reclining guests fades behind walls, painted with gods who always watch and never blink. Here the table does not belong to mortals anymore. It is long and orderly, lined with clay jars, baskets of bread, and slabs of meat arranged not for feasting, but for surrender. Smoke rises from a small altar, its curl catching the dim morning light like a thread of silver unraveling from the sky. You feel your stomach still heavy with honey and wine, and realize this food is not meant for you, though you wouldn't mind sneaking a fig, and probably wouldn't survive if anyone caught you doing it. The smell is strange, layered, sharp resin, roasted goose, sweet beer, and the bitter sting of frankincense. Together it clings like a perfume that doesn't want you to leave. A priest in linen walks slowly, his feet soundless except for the whisper of fabric brushing stone. He lifts a loaf shaped like the sun disk, places it carefully before the statue, and mutters words you don't understand. Do they really think the god eats this? You ask quietly. The boy next to you, sweeping the floor, smirks. Of course, but only the invisible part. You choke on a laugh because somehow that logic feels uncomfortably close to how you once convinced yourself the calories in broken. Cookies didn't count. The statues loom above, painted eyes staring through you. A basket of onions is set down with reverence, though just yesterday you saw children juggling the same bulbs in the market. That's the thing. You're not sure what makes one onion ordinary and another divine, but apparently the gods have their preferences, and when you see lettuce appear again, this time set solemnly beside beer jars, you nearly lose it. The priest treats it as if he's laying down a relic, yet you remember it was introduced last night as an aphrodisiac. So the gods get wine on a date night? You whisper. The sweeping boy shrugs. Better than us. A soft chanting begins, low and steady, vibrating through the ribs of the temple, The notes rise and fall like the river itself. The sound presses against your ears, turning the air heavy, and for a moment you close your eyes. When you open them, you catch sight of something stranger than the bread, the onions, or the lettuce. A goose stuffed with figs, its golden skin gleaming under torchlight. This bird will never be eaten. It will sit here, spoil, and eventually be carried away by priests who insist the god consumed its essence. You're reminded of hotel buffets where half the trays go untouched, and wonder if somewhere in history that too might have counted as an offering. Conversation flickers between the men arranging jars. One says, "This will keep the Nile's flood strong." Another answers, "Or keep Pharaoh strong." The third mutters, "Or keep us fed." They laugh, quickly silenced by the priest's glare. You pretend to study the painted walls, rows of offerings drawn like menus, ducks, bread loaves, beer jugs, papyrus stalks. It's like someone made a grocery list and then carved it forever into stone. You remember a well-known moment when Pharaoh Akhenaten declared that Aten, the sun disk, was the only god worthy of offerings. Entire temples were stripped, food redirected, chants rewritten. For a brief time, Egypt's divine menu was simplified into sunlight itself. But historians still debate whether that was devotion, politics, or just one king tired of feeding too many gods. Either way, the old gods returned after his death. Their tables quickly reset with onions, beer, and birds, as if Aten had only been a guest who overstayed. Another detail slips into view, one most tourists wouldn't notice: small cakes shaped like cows. These are laid not at the feet of Ra or Osiris, but for Hathor, the goddess who loved music and joy. Sweet, golden, sticky, they look like something you'd find in a pastry shop window. You almost step closer, drawn by the smell, but a servant blocks you, shaking his head. "These are for her ears only." You blink. "Her ears?" He nods solemnly. "She hears sweetness," which, to be fair, sounds exactly like how someone justifies buying donuts after a long day. The heat thickens as the incense burns stronger, sweat beading on your temple. A woman enters carrying lotus blossoms, their blue petals startling against the muted stone. She scatters them across the offerings, and suddenly the entire altar feels alive, shimmering with color. You catch yourself staring at the flowers, as if they might open wider just for you. "Do you think the gods actually smell this?" You murmur. The boy leans on his broom. "They smell everything. Even you." He wrinkles his nose theatrically. You laugh, which earns you a stern look from the priest. The ritual continues. Jars of beer are opened, froth spilling onto the floor. Bread loaves are broken in half, not to share with people, but to release their spirit. You imagine the gods somewhere above, sipping the essence like invisible critics at a food festival. A priest waves burning resin, the smoke curling into animal shapes if you squint hard enough. You lean back against a cool column, the stone rough on your shoulder, and feel oddly comforted. The lesser-known fact that sticks with you is that sometimes even leftovers from these offerings were considered holy enough to eat by priests. Which means, in a way, they got the strangest catering job in history, cleaning up after the gods. You imagine someone biting into a day-old goose and saying, "Tastes divine," and everyone pretending not to laugh. Time drifts as the chants repeat, their rhythm like a lullaby wrapped in smoke. The heat, the perfume, the strange mix of foods, all of it pushes you toward drowsiness. You don't know how long you stand there, watching onions glow like jewels under torchlight. The gods do not move, do not speak, yet their table feels crowded, fuller than the banquet you just left. Eventually, the priest lowers his hands, signaling an end. The room exhales. You step outside, the sun suddenly blinding, heat like a slap compared to the cool incense hall. Behind you, the gods keep their feast eternal and untasted. Ahead of you, the Nile shimmers wide and alive, carrying boats that rock gently on its currents. And you sense that the river itself is next, the table none can refuse, where even the gods' offerings might be carried downstream. The glare of sunlight after incense feels like stepping from a dark cinema into a matinee. Your eyes squint, your skin prickles, and the world suddenly shouts with brightness. The Nile spreads before you, wide and alive, a ribbon of silver-green rippling under the sweep of gulls and the snap of sails. You catch the damp smell of river mud, warm reeds, and the faint tang of fish, a scent both sharp and oddly reassuring, like walking past a fish market just as the day begins. The stone coolness of the temple lingers on your shoulders, but here the sun pushes down heavy and hot, like someone laying a heated blanket across you without asking. The noise is constant, water slapping against boat hulls, vendors shouting from the banks, oars creaking in sockets, and threaded through it all, the rhythm of replenishment itself, cycles of flooding and retreat that set the tempo for every loaf, every onion, every goose you've seen on tables both mortal and divine. You stand by the edge, where children balance on the reeds, dangling lines into the current. One boy hauls up a small tilapia, silver scales flashing like coins, and grins wide enough to rival any fisherman's brag. For breakfast, you tease. He nods solemnly, always. The river feeds us before the fields. It's true. Here the Nile is the first pantry, the one that never locks. You watch him drop the fish into a basket still dripping with river water, and it smells fresh, briny, alive. As you walk further, a barge glides past, piled with clay jars. A man standing tall on deck shouts, "Beer for the south, bread for the north." His voice carries confident, like a modern food delivery guy yelling your order but with way more flair. Someone on shore shouts back, "Don't forget the onions." The man laughs, tossing a small bundle onto the bank where a girl catches it with both hands. You can't help grinning. It feels like the Nile is Amazon Prime with oars. The rhythm is everywhere. You notice a farmer knee-deep in water, guiding a plow pulled by oxen through thick mud. The smell of wet earth rises, rich and heady, like a bag of potting soil dumped fresh onto the floor. He wipes his brow and waves. "It will be a good flood," he says. You nod, not sure how he knows. But the certainty in his voice feels anchored, and you remember, one of the most famous moments in Egypt's story was the annual flooding of the Nile. Without it, no bread, no beer, no life. When the waters came too high, villages drowned. Too low, famine stalked the land. The very calendar bent itself around the river, counting its moods more carefully than kings. In fact, entire ceremonies revolved around praising Hapi, the Nile god, as though the flood itself were a guest who might sulk, if not properly entertained. Did they ever measure it? You ask aloud. An older man with a reed basket answers, "Always. The Nilometer tells us when we must fast, when we can feast." He points upriver toward a stone pillar carved with marks. You imagine priests leaning over it, whispering numbers like meteorologists with far more dramatic stakes. Historians still debate whether those numbers were always accurate, or whether priests massaged them to keep fear or gratitude flowing in the right directions. Either way, the Nile dictated breakfast more firmly than any pharaoh. As the day warms, women gather on the shore, washing clothes. Bright linens slap against stones, sending droplets glittering into sunlight. The sound is rhythmic, thwop splash thwop, as steady as a drummer keeping time. You pause, watching a girl wring out a red cloth, her arms gleaming with water, and for a moment the whole riverbank looks like a living metronome. Beside them, a group of men lower woven baskets into the shallows, pulling up shrimp that writhe like tiny commas on a page. One laughs. "Better than figs." Another shakes his head. "Only if fried." The debate ripples with chuckles, echoing the eternal argument over which pizza topping is best. You don't dare join in. You know how dangerous those conversations get. The smell of roasting drifts from a nearby boat. You step closer, drawn by the promise of fish sizzling on flat clay pans. The air fills with a crackle, a hiss, the heady perfume of charred skin and hot oil. A woman flips the fish deftly, the edges crisping to gold. She notices you staring. "Hungry?" You laugh, raising your hands. "Always," she grins. Then the river has done its work. A smaller detail catches your eye. Bundles of papyrus stacked neatly by the shore, drying under the sun. You know papyrus as writing material, but here it smells faintly sweet, green and grassy, as though freshly mown. A man explains, "We eat it too, the stalk, not the words." You blink. "Papyrus breakfast?" He chuckles at your face. "Don't look so shocked. It's softer than bread if boiled." Right. It's one of those lesser-known facts that sticks with Are you the same plant that preserved history? Also filled bellies, the rhythm of the Nile is not just flood and retreat, it's generosity and danger bound together. You catch sight of a crocodile's tail sliding silently beneath the surface, and for a heartbeat, the river's kindness feels conditional. A fisherman claps his hands sharply, startling the creature into deeper water. He smirks. Even the gods eat. You shiver, half laughing, half aware of how easily the cycle tips from gift to threat. The sun climbs higher, baking the mud into cracks, turning the air heavy, sticky, like stepping into a sauna that forgot to add eucalyptus. Sweat trickles down your back, and you envy the children splashing freely in the shallows, their laughter bright and reckless. One boy dunks another, who surfaces sputtering, "Happy bless me." They both collapse into giggles. You think about how kids everywhere invent the same jokes, whether with water balloons or river gods. You keep walking past baskets brimming with melons, past jars of beer cooling in the current. A group of workers gathers around a spread of simple food, bread discs, onions, and small dried fish. They eat quickly, hungrily, the sound of chewing mingling with the slap of water on stone. One offers you a piece of bread. You accept, bite down, and taste the river itself. Grain nurtured by floods, water drawn into clay, life pressed into a loaf. It's plain, chewy, satisfying. He nods at your expression. Better than gold. You believe him. Above the gull's wheel and cry, shadows darting across the rippling surface. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of lotus flowers mixed with damp reeds. You close your eyes for a moment, the warmth of the sun heavy on your eyelids, the hum of the river steady in your ears. It feels like the world itself breathing in and out, flood and retreat, feast and famine. And you realize this rhythm is the real offering, the one gods and mortals alike depend on. Temples may burn incense, palaces may boast banquets, but here the river writes the menu every year, in mud and water. The barge you saw earlier disappears downriver, its sails taut, its wake curling like fingers through the current. You watch it fade, carrying onions, beer, bread, carrying breakfast itself to another shore. And as the sun lowers slightly, softening its glare, you sense the next beat of this rhythm waiting in the fields beyond, where barley and wheat already whisper toward harvest. You step away from the glare of the river and feel the earth tugging you inland, where fields stretch under the same merciless sun, but pulse with a different rhythm. Grain instead of fish, silence instead of gull cries, dust instead of river spray. The ground crunches beneath your sandals, every step puffing up little clouds of beige powder that immediately find their way into your nose. You sneeze, and a farmer nearby chuckles, first harvest greeting, as if dust itself has a sense of humor. The fields breathe with labor, sickles whisper through barley, stalks fall with soft sighs, and the air shimmers with heat so thick you could almost slice it like bread. Women kneel at the margins, weaving mats from reeds, their fingers moving so fast it looks like someone pressed fast forward on a VHS tape. Except, of course, you're centuries before VHS. Sweat trickles down your back, slow as honey. And you realize this is the true Nile economy. Bodies bent, sun burning, grain gathered as though every kernel matters more than gold. A boy hands you a head of barley, still warm from the sun, and says, "Taste." You bite down, and it's like chewing raw ambition, hard, fibrous, and a little too honest. You grin politely while thinking this would never trend on TikTok recipes. He laughs. Not good, yes? Better when ground. He runs off, feet slapping the earth, leaving you with barley husks sticking to your tongue like popcorn kernels at a bad movie. The threshing floor hums like a stage. Oxen plod in circles, hooves crushing stalks against the packed clay. The sound is rhythmic, steady, hypnotic, like the world's slowest EDM track. Dust rises golden and relentless, making every breath taste like ancient granola. Farmers sing to keep time, deep voices rolling in call and response. Bread for the gods. One calls, bread for the living. The others answer. You find yourself humming along even though you don't know the words because the beat of survival is contagious. A man with arms like carved wood waves you over. "Help," he says, pointing at a wide winnowing basket. You take one handle, he takes the other, and together you toss crushed stalks into the air. Chaff lifts like shimmering smoke, drifting away on the faintest breeze, while grain drops heavy and loyal back into the basket. The man nods. "See? Gods take the light. We keep the weight." You blink, impressed by the poetry of it, half expecting him to copyright it as a slogan. Nearby, children dart around with bundles of onions, their laughter sharp and sweet, echoing like bells across the field. The smell drifts toward you, sharp, sulphurous, earthy. One girl holds up an onion almost as big as her head and declares, "This feeds 4 men." Another shouts back, "5 if they are weak." The grown-ups laugh, but you notice how carefully the bulbs are stacked, wrapped, stored. These onions aren't garnish. They're wages, rations, medicine. Later, Roman soldiers will munch them for strength, swearing by their sting. For now, they're just humble bulbs with epic ambitions. The heat grows heavier, pressing on your shoulders like an unwanted cloak. Your lips crack. Then, like a miracle, a jug of beer appears in front of you, carried by a smiling woman who might as well be an angel. She offers it without a word. You sip. It's thick, gritty, sour, more liquid bread than drink. The texture is closer to oatmeal gone rogue, but after hours in the sun it tastes like salvation with bubbles. "Good?" she asks. You nod. "Like breakfast and lunch in one," she grins. "And dinner if gods are kind." Historians still debate whether this beer was more nourishing than intoxicating, but right now it feels like both. You picture modern athletes with protein shakes and can't help laughing. Egyptians already had their own Gatorade, just cloudier. By mid-afternoon, shadows shrink to puddles under every object. You feel roasted, toasted, practically rotisserie. A farmer fans himself with a palm frond and mutters, "Sun is Pharaoh's whip." Another replies, "Then may Pharaoh never blink." They both chuckle, but keep working, because what else can they do? Survival isn't a weekend hobby here. It's the daily grind, literally in the stones, where women kneel to crush grain into flour. The grinding stones rasp like an endless chorus of teeth, gnawing hours into powder. The sound gets into your bones, steady, relentless. One woman notices your stare. "You want to try?" she asks. You nod, kneel, take the pestle in your hands. The motion is harder than it looks, a drag and push that makes your arms ache instantly. You barely manage a handful of flour before collapsing sideways, gasping like a fish. The women laugh kindly. "Strong shoulders, weak heart," one teases. Another adds, "No bread without pain." You feel oddly proud to have contributed a spoonful of flour to someone's supper, even if your dignity is the real ingredient sacrificed. In the distance, a shrine rises, small but luminous, where priests gather the first sheaves of grain. Incense curls again, sweet and resinous, and you recognize the ritual echo of the river's offerings. Bread is placed beside beer, onions beside salt. The air is heavy with devotion and smoke, a reminder that food feeds not just bellies but eternity. Somewhere in the background, someone mutters about a pharaoh who once tried to take control of the grain distribution and nearly sparked riots. One of those historical moments where politics and stomachs collided, as they always do. You pause, realizing that sustenance here isn't just calories. It's labor, prayer, bargaining, community. Every loaf of bread hums with echoes of oxen hooves, women's songs, children's laughter, and God's smoke. You chew on that thought, metaphorically this time, because literal chewing would only get you more barley husks. As twilight edges the fields with violet, workers gather, sitting in circles, passing loaves and jugs. The bread is dark, coarse, studded with grit from grinding stones, and you crunch down on more sand than sesame. Still it fills you, warms you. A man hands you half a loaf and says, "Eat, tomorrow we start again." The cycle is endless, but the sharing makes it gentle. And as the stars begin to prick the sky, you realize the echoes of sustenance aren't just in your ears, they're in your stomach, your skin, your bones. reminding you that survival is never silent. Tomorrow, whispers of offering will rise again, not from fields, but perhaps from granaries, where shadows stretch long over stored hope. The sun has dropped, and the fields exhale. The earth that scorched your souls hours ago now radiates a softer warmth, like the lingering heat from a stone oven after the bread has been pulled out. Shadows stretch long across the stubbled barley stalks, and the sky deepens from molten orange into a velvet indigo, pinpricked by the first shy stars. You sink lower with the land's rhythm, your body cooling, your breath slowing. It's the kind of evening that whispers, the work is over, at least until dawn insists otherwise. You hear crickets strike up their steady fiddling, a chorus layered over the faint sigh of wind through papyrus reeds. Smoke rises lazily from cooking fires, carrying with it the sharp tang of onions and the comforting heaviness of baking bread. Someone nearby drops a clay jar, and it breaks with a pop so crisp it could be a percussion note. The laughter that follows is light, forgiving, and you feel the whole settlement loosening, joints unclenching after a day bent under the sun. A man offers you a flat cake still warm from the hearth. You bite, and this one tastes far kinder than raw barley, a chewy mix of grain, honey, and perhaps a pinch of dates. Sweetness clings to your tongue, a small reward after the grit of sand you endured earlier. You murmur thanks, and he shrugs. All bread belongs to tomorrow, but tonight we share. His words glow as much as the embers lighting his face. Children dart around the fire's edge, their silhouettes sharp against the flicker. One boy puffs his chest, declaring, "I will grow strong as Ramses." Another retorts, "You cannot even lift a goose." The adults chuckle, but you notice how Ramses' name still carries weight centuries after his reign. The pharaoh who built temples so massive, even modern cranes would complain. History breathes through children's games, the past stitched into bedtime boasts. The air cools further, brushing your skin like river water, and you pull your cloak tighter. Somewhere, an old woman begins a low song, her voice a husky riverbed, telling of floods that once rose too high, when homes and fields vanished beneath walls of water. You catch fragments, the year of hunger, the year of silence. People murmur, some nodding, others gazing into the fire as if weighing memory against flame. Historians still debate the extent of those ancient famines, but here in this circle no one doubts their echo. A younger man counters, "And yet the Nile returned." His voice lifts, certain, like a hand-cupping light. The old woman smiles faintly, and you feel the tug between remembering loss and believing in renewal, the rhythm of survival itself. You tilt your head back and watch the stars multiply. Salt scattered across a vast blue-black platter. The Milky Way stretches bold, a luminous band the Egyptians called the Heavenly River. It mirrors the Nile below, as if reminding everyone that their toil is part of a grander flow. You inhale, and the night air smells of damp earth cooling, mixed with sweet resin from burning acacia wood. It is grounding, almost drowsy, like incense in a late-night yoga class. Someone passes around a jug of beer. This time it's smoother, strained finer, tasting faintly of dates and smoke. Better. The man asks you, you nod. Definitely less like chewing breakfast. The group laughs and the sound rises like sparks into the night. Your shoulders ease as conversations drift. One farmer recalls a rumor of Joseph, the foreigner said to have stored grain for 7 years, saving Egypt during famine. Another shakes his head, a tale maybe. But we all know granaries feed Pharaoh first. There's no bitterness, just the kind of wry acceptance you'd hear in a modern office when payday lags. The firelight softens faces, smoothing worry lines. You notice how everyone leans in slightly, bodies instinctively closing the circle against the vastness of desert night. The crackle of flames, the buzz of insects, the occasional bray of a donkey, all combine into a lullaby stitched from earth itself. You remember the grinding stones from earlier, their rasp still in your arms, but here the sound is replaced by murmured stories low and steady. An elder tells of scorpions slipping into sandals left carelessly outside. Always shake before you step, he warns. A boy gasps, then grins nervously, clutching his feet. The elder winks, enjoying the effect. It's a small lesson wrapped in play. Survival folded into folklore. The cool deepens. You feel goosebumps rise along your arms, the night air now sharp as polished obsidian. Someone drapes a woven cloth over your shoulders, the fibers scratchy but warm. First night gift, she says. You thank her, surprised by the intimacy, and she replies, we all share the dark. You close your eyes briefly and hear it all layered, oxen's tread lingering in memory, women's grinding songs echoing faintly, fire crackles, laughter, wind. It is as though the entire day replays in softer tones, night remixing morning into a gentler track, and then silence thickens. The fire burns lower, embers pulsing like tired hearts. Voices fade, replaced by the steady hush of the Nile not far away. Even the crickets seem to bow out, leaving room for the night itself to breathe. You lie back on a mat, staring at the constellations that ancient priests once mapped to gods and myths. Orion's belt gleams sharp, while Sirius, the dog star, blazes bright, the same star they watched for signs of the Nile's flood. A dog barks distantly, and you smile at the echo across millennia. Some sounds never leave the night. The weight of bread in your stomach, the warmth of cloth on your shoulders, the smoke in your hair, all combine to lull you. Tomorrow will bring granaries, shadows, storage, the future of harvest sealed in clay. But for now the day exhales fully. Surrendering to sleep, you breathe in once more, smoke, dust, bread, stars, and breathe out the last threads of wakefulness. The night remembers the dawn, but for you it can wait. Rest now, end of script. Sweet dreams.